now is we're going to move into disaster and social inclusion. I'd like you to take this sheet out. There's one or two faces I recognize from the half-day pilot. You will notice a version of this exercise. You're now getting the broader version. And what I want you to do, and Cliff, I want you to sit at a different table, please.
I'm going to go back there?
No, Margaret's there. I want you here.
Okay.
Allow social engineering.
Yep.
All right. I want you, in your groups, to read the information and identify, once you've read the information about disaster impacts, identify what are the differential impacts. Try to think among yourselves based on what you read this morning. What are the causes of these gaps between different social groups? What are the possible ways one can deal with them? So have a crack at that. And just
You ready? Yeah. Should we start with the gaps? Gaps of what? Gaps? Causes of the gaps.
Why do you think?
Why 91% of the women were counted for the death? Well, from my experience, for example, in like Tamil Nadu, AP, and all these places where affected by tsunami, boys learned how to swim. Girls never swam, so they drowned. So the big thing was that boys can go swimming in their underwear. Women can't. They got to wear their saris, which is very heavy.
Yeah.
And when it gets wet, you can't swim. I mean, it's a long 6-yard piece of cloth that's wrapped around your whole body. You can't swim. So for me, from my experience, that's a big thing. Like we do school safety training in Tamil Nadu, Odisha, and Andhra Pradesh in India, because I do community-based disaster management. If you ask the boys and girls, how many of you can swim? The boys will raise their hands. Girls don't. And it's very hard. We give swimming classes, but it's very hard to get the girls. I mean, swimsuits don't exist. Huh? Exactly. Swimsuits don't. I mean, modesty. Right? Not gonna. So for me, a lot of these, particularly in Bangladesh, these Asian countries, culture of women not knowing how to. When I was doing this in Vietnam, children died the most because they didn't know how to swim. And so our CBDR and one of our activities was swimming classes.
Yeah.
How to swim with clothes on. Like, okay, to get over that cultural norm, how to swim with clothes on.
So how about the communication? When they are doing they need to know.
It also, I don't know if it's a need to know, but like when you call a group meeting without specifically specifying who should be there, heads of families come, and it's usually men. So that does happen if you're not consciously saying, yeah.
But sometimes I also do community. So we want to.
I'm also wondering, because they're at home, right? They're often with the kids.
They care when they work from us, right? So when we started talking,
And so as a result, they don't say themselves.
Yeah.
and then they started said, I want you to come back.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder maybe because it's a kind of soft kind of component, so women tend to be interested, or kind of male colleague may consider, okay, this is like quite like female field.
That's around.
Yeah, that's the problem. Yeah, that's the problem.
It's like a lot of places in rural Pakistan, they would not want to leave their house compound, even in the emergency.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not an unredeemed experience. I have the situation where I
Rescue.
to work for the Red Cross, which is like testosterone central. And it's with Black Jacket Brigade.
Was that what it was? For Hurricane Mitch, that was the reason? Oh.
And it was when I was trying to get people to talk about not in this language, it's the current language, but another language, of course, there's recovery and relief operations.
91% in Bangladesh.
Like hygiene items for women's periods. Sorry, women's periods.
Yeah, that's why you're here. No?
They're still in the period and they need things. And it's really bad for them. Yeah, so
Yeah.
from the little word.
And I think that's a good example of going back to your comment earlier. You said soft. You described it soft.
Yeah.
And I think what
So
it
I
is
wanted to pick up on people with disabilities.
men are going to be interested in the things that affect them. And you said this, to me, this is an example of that. In the worst way.
Sorry, yeah, I use soft, but then because we normally use a structure and a non-structure. So non-structure, like soft component. That's why.
The very real example. They also change at some point. They don't have to think about that. They don't want to think about that. So that's why is that important? For half the population, yes.
If you want to be born, you need to.
So you should be thinking about it too. That is, right?
Maybe it's just part of that. Not in a conscious way.
No.
I think that's the issue of empathy. It's not just my problem. It's also somebody else's problem.
But the reason why you're here or why you're born is because your mother. Period, right?
thinking that they're not
right? They would be relying on other.
exactly. That's what
Should we try to answer?
yeah.
The
Because like
task?
where they have a lot more preparedness. For
Identify
example,
causes of
like
the
islands
gaps.
in Japan
Like,
in the
yeah,
south,
for instance, just to
when they
start, I
prepare
would say
their
that
evacuation
causes of the
plan,
gaps to
response
everything
plan,
here is
they have
because the gaps
identified
already
where
existed, before the
people
disaster
like
happened.
they
So,
know where the flooding will happen first. So they've
first of all,
identified the people who are disabled or
disaster is
elderly in
never
that area,
neutral,
and they
because it
organize the way of
reflects,
evacuation
impacts
from
reflects
the hazard
already in the
areas to
society.
and knowing
So
who to
because of that,
help
you
first
can-
and
when
who's
you
going to
see
go
that
help.
women are more affected, it's also because they're like in most part of the world still like more disadvantaged and that gender
Yeah.
roles sort
That's
of
the thing.
limits makes that affect women more in terms of, for instance, that
Interesting
they
what I heard Yuka say over there that a lot of, which is true, right? And a lot of women aren't taught how to and a lot of these, I mean, this is the tsunami cycle, a lot of water,
houses without male permission, stuff like that. So all of that.
so it's sort of back to the training.
Women, and also an important thing is also the lack of information and access to information
Part of it.
when the disaster strikes. Maybe they don't have that information that maybe men have. So they can, evacuate, and that also comes to like with disabilities as well. Maybe like,
But I think
like all
it's
the
even before that.
evacuation
They're not
that
thinking
with disabilities
about
that
what to do in a disaster. It's just not there. Yeah. So the thing is that people, when they do risk assessments and prepare disaster management plans, then they for the first time they think. But if they've never really, like some people grow up never having experienced disaster and it's their first tsunami, their first thing is run. Yeah, they're not like, oh, okay, where's the elderly in my community? You're like, I gotta save myself. So it's even before that. It's not like they don't care. They're thinking about finances. No, it's like I gotta save myself. So it's before that.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of addressing the gaps, right? It's obviously something as you said. If you are putting in place an early warning system, there are several elements here that you can think about. But in a lot of these places, that's one of the basic problems that's lacking.
One thing that
Generally,
is the nature of we're seeing fluctuated diversity in but less when it comes less in sex men
people are taken out of their home environments and put into more vulnerable contexts, like a refugee camp, IDP camp, where they suddenly have to walk around people who are not from their immediate community, where everyone knows each other, social norms. And suddenly, predators sort of see that as an opportunity because they're no longer a
in
familiar
fact, there is
face.
some evidence that shows, for example, that social norms and actually occupation and the time where things happen, how it affects as well. So, for example, let me first come back to your first question on the difference between the volume of deaths. I mean, what happens, for example, now if you look at the rates that we are seeing in Bangladesh, they have diminished a lot because there had been a lot of intervention on disaster risk management and disaster risk reduction. So now there are you have even shelters specific addressed to women that, take out a bit the fear that some of them had to be on a shelter mixed. You see, so that has changed a lot. I think in the case of the tsunami, there is a lot of evidence that the fact that it was during daylight at the time of fishing, those that were at the sea actually had lesser impacts than those that were inland. And for example, one thing that to me, the first time I listened about what you see in Hurricane Mitch, why there more men than women. And then I was reading that is social norms, because in Latin America, the men are supposed to protect everything, the family assets. So they evacuate the family and they stay back. So you also have these gender roles and the social norms about what's your role as a man or women of the family. And that plays a role in, what's your possibility of surviving an event.
Also, what I learned about women things is some culture, like a Muslim culture, for example, they're told like a woman should not run, for example, or take the bicycle. So these people tried to evacuate, but then couldn't evacuate successfully. And then also these people are not learned how to swim, for example, in specific country. So they didn't have coping mechanism to.
Yeah, and about that not being permitted to go outside of the house without the roommate's permission, like if he's at work and something happens, stay in because you can.
Yeah.
Especially in a situation of crisis, yeah.
No.
Saying that, it's marginalized fine, but they were the inmates, right? They
There's something I wanted to say also, like a problem we have, because we did this community risk assessment, vulnerability assessment, and planning in Bangladesh and other countries. And one of the things that the community was saying is they don't want their little house is all they own.
Yeah.
This is it's their entire assets, their cows, their goats, whatever. They wait until water is here before they evacuate. Because they are scared if they evacuate too early, people will come and steal their things. So people stay in their house until here, and then they're like, okay, we better go in. So if you're waiting until here, you're not going to have time to be evacuating other people, because then you'll be leaving your
That land
house.
will never be in your name.
So that's another thing where
it gives
people,
you lesser of a chance.
There are always going to be bad people who take advantage of the situation, try to steal.
And I'm sure that that's on the gender side.
No, they get the instructions, but they don't want to leave their house. And they don't trust.
Disabilities, also because we've seen that there is more violence, sexual violence in time when there is disasters. So there are a lot of things that need to be considered.
Yeah, I think it's very important to understand the specific country context. Because, I mean, these numbers all vary by country and also by when it happened. And I'm actually, this is very interesting to me that men may suffer greater fatalities when thunderstorms. I mean, you mentioned that in Latin America, households and all
that was the explanation that they did on the Hurricane Mitch. But I was surprised as well on knowing why the thunderstorms. That I don't know.
Well, I would imagine that, at least for flash floods, I would imagine that demographics has a role to play in, because, I would imagine in urbanization, mostly it's men who populate most of the urban settings. And so, therefore, if in areas where flash flooding does occur, in urban environments, in those environments, that the proportion is men. I'm not saying, I would imagine that's probably that has to play, but also there's a coastal aspect to it of men fishing, and so I guess it goes back to the question, to your point about context matters in all of these things.
For me, one point that I tend to overlook, and it's this thing on the migrant laborers. It's true that we never realize when, this case of Myanmar and Thailand is very telling. What happens when you have left your country with a migrant status, and maybe you are from a minority, you can be a Rohingya, maybe you are not recognized by Myanmar, you move to Thailand, something happened. You cannot even get passport anymore or papers to say who you are, where you're coming from.
One of the things that we talk about tell us minority happen with disasters.
I agree.
What happened after that? But if you next disaster that happened 5 years later, was the number 6?
Yeah, in Bangladesh we know that it's. I don't remember the numbers by.
Do you remember why?
But actually it was because they started to have interventions and having, for example, better early warning systems. It had all these things on the shelters where they started to have shelters that were prepared for women. where there was a bit of a separation, so there was less of a fear of going there.
Big entry point, by the way, is anyone who's searching for a sex worker.
I would assume it's the same thing.
This one, were you trying to work out why the men died?
We were wondering not so much on the hearing.
Who is expected to rescue? So
Yeah.
gender disadvantage can work both ways.
Yeah, but we were wondering.
Because men were expected to go to raging floodwaters to try to perform in human rescue.
And that's the case in general for the thunderstorms and flash floods as well?
Yeah, you get it wherever you've got those kind of disasters and you've got men being asked to go into possible situations. Okay, guys, we'll have to wrap up and have just a really, really quick synopsis from each group. We'll start with the middle one this time. Quick synopsis. 2 key points.
Sure. We talked, got through most of this. We talked a lot about issues around cultural norms and empowerment, particularly around women, disabilities, and elderly. There's kind of cultural norms around women being at the home and how that may have affected where they would be during times of disaster and their ability to respond, as well as then with, I want to say how people are valued, but also how then again it would affect how their ability to access transportation or resources and funds. And again, how that would be, how you should address that gaps and programming.
Targeted programming?
Yes, targeted programming.
Back table.
Gaps. One of the do a lot of communities. One of the key gaps that in Asia, particularly, why we find a lot of women and children die, because when I ask like school children, how many of you know how to swim? This is in tsunami flood situation. Boys raise their hands because there's no cultural norm that's preventing them from jumping into a river and learn to swim. But a lot of girls, because of the modesty thing, they don't know how to swim. So a lot of the times they're wearing saris or these heavy clothing and they drown. And that's one of the key things. And then another thing is a lot of times, particularly in villages, they wait until the floodwater is here before they evacuate because the house is all they own. That's the entire asset. And so, and the women are the ones at home most of the time. The men might be in the town, whatever, market, whatever. And so the women, and they're waiting until the water's here because they're worried about protecting their assets. Because if they evacuate too early, people might break in. And so another thing we had to teach them was, so in our community-based assessment, we do a lot of swimming classes and how to swim with clothes on. Another thing is how to protect your assets, knowing what things you need to be putting in a plastic bag so that you can take it with you when you evacuate, so you don't have to worry about it. And also making sure that our shelters have livestock sheds so that they feel comfortable to take their livestock with them and they're not being there. So these are, you have to understand.
A lot of people die protecting their animals.
Exactly. So understand what they're most worried about. So to understand those gaps is really. Who thought that swimming was a simple thing that could? In Vietnam as well, we had a lot of children die because they were not taught how to swim. And so those are the kind of things that you have to.
Okay, great. Point number 2, understanding what is most important to people and what they value. Do we know how they are going to react in a disaster? We can put up all the bullhorns we like and all the signs we like, but do we know how people are going to react based on the environment around them and what's available to them?
So we had one more.
Need to be really quick because we're running behind.
A proper warning system and who does the warning. So it has to be done by someone who they listen to and trust. And how that warning is done in stages. People know how to react to those.
Yeah. One of the biggest weaknesses that I see in DRM programming at scale, like the kind of scale the bank does, is lots of fancy jargon about end-to-end warning systems. And then I look at the community consultation components. and they're incredibly weak. They don't unpack what is a community, and they tend to work through standard systems, which means you'll protect a certain group, they'll get the information, and they'll tell you how they need the information delivered, but the groups who are marginalized aren't a part of that conversation. So the systems get designed and leave them out, and that's one of the reasons you see those sorts of statistics, that the end-to-end early warning systems actually don't end where they need to. I'm only going to give you a very quick though.
Maybe I can just say to build on that, the access to information part is very important. To not assume that information is neutral the way that people get it, and I think that's like one of the most important things. But another thing, and feel free to add, was more that when thinking about all the causes of the gaps, there is related to gaps that maybe they're already existing in the society, and that when disaster strikes, then those gaps that are already there are like exacerbated. Yeah. And when designing programs, for instance, on preparedness that do not take into account the different needs, that's when things like this happen, right? Yeah. That people with disabilities and women, etc., that they have higher mortality rates. Yeah.
And the last thing we'll say is that the discussion we started with is that DRM is a very male-dominated field, and this class shows that apparently in the bank, the vast majority of the people who care about socially inclusive DRM are not men. Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, this is so. This is
there are two notable exceptions.
Yes, absolutely. And this is a reflection also of the issue we're talking about what gets addressed and what doesn't get addressed.
Yeah, lots and lots. Really good analysis.
You like that, no?
And what I would do on the information one, there is just so much evidence, so much information about communications going wrong. I just can't believe we still can't get it right. And the evaluations I've done with survivors and what they've been through because of our total lack of awareness of their context and our failure to communicate in a way that reaches them, it's just heartbreaking. Okay, I'm going to free you for lunch soon, but if you can bear with me for just a few minutes, you're going to see a bit of what you already said. So you already have some idea of what's happening in these disaster situations to socially excluded groups. I'm just going to put a little frame around it. I'm going to do this really quickly. And we can talk about it some more over lunch. And after lunch, we'll be doing a couple of case studies where you're actually going to look at the case studies in depth. This is just a quick picture. You've identified some of them. I won't go back through them. But these are some of the factors that have affected risk and resilience in terms of being for groups that are socially excluded. They're often having issues of lack of access or lack of influence in all of these areas. And you can see the ones you've already identified in your small group discussions of them like this. Pretty obvious. You've already mentioned it. Your risk depends on your context. It also depends on how those factors I showed you combine. And it also depends on forms of social exclusion and how they combine. There is a tendency, just as, was it Charlotte who said that, there's a tendency to call everyone la poor and have this homogenous group la poor. The same thing happens with groups that tend to get excluded. You have people with disabilities, but as Charlotte said earlier, there's all different kinds of disability. There are people, and then these things interact. You have gender. So what happens to me if I'm a blind woman in a society where there's discrimination against both disability and discrimination against women? I'm probably going to be a bit more vulnerable, aren't I? And same as if I am a transvestite who didn't learn to swim, didn't have the opportunity, I'm going to be at higher risk than possibly a woman who learned to swim. So we have to be careful again about the assumptions and the stereotyping, but what happens is you can end up though with layer upon layer of vulnerability arising out of your circumstances and the various identities that you have and how they come together. This is just an example of an identity one person can have and the many factors that could end up influencing their risk of ending up in that situation, in that sheet. You could have a whole lot of different combinations. The important thing is that we understand. It's what somebody said in the exercise before, that we didn't know enough about people's needs, their priorities, their situation, that we don't understand it enough, and so we don't react in the right way. And this is why we desperately need to do social analysis, both pre and post-disaster, not just for PDNAs, but also for thinking about risk reduction programming and everything we do. We need to understand people's capacities and vulnerabilities. We focused on vulnerabilities here, but there are also strengths that these identities give to people that we often stereotype or misunderstand as well, and so we tend to think that a person in a particular situation is helpless or can't do anything for themselves, and it's quite mistaken. That most people with multiple identities have various strengths and capacities that they bring to the process, that they bring to the table, and abilities to contribute to disaster risk reduction and to making safer communities as well. Drivers, asked, obviously, that's why we're here, is a key driver. We've already gone through it. It increases risk. And if we look at that same, at one of the frameworks we use, because of barriers to access to assets for community hostings and communities to protect themselves, for these groups who tend to lack these things, they end up overrepresented in the bad statistics. There are opportunities to participate in household and community resilience and even higher resilience initiatives are reduced compared to mainstream groups, and so their risk is higher again. Their ability to contribute to planning and decision making is often limited to invisible at every level. And so yet again, if the voice is not heard and we don't understand their needs and circumstances, we are not designing disaster risk management strategies that reflect some of the most at-risk groups. That is the bottom line. If we do not include people of all different that are representative of the composition of our societies, and if we do not consult with them and understand them, we will design things that continue to exclude and bypass, and there's a lot of it. You've already seen this morning, but just to get the idea, we're not talking about small groups of people here. We're not talking about little minorities that, as someone said, can be shown, that someone said, well, that's all important, but we need to deal with the main problems, and we'll deal with that later. Have a look at what we're talking about. People with disabilities are estimated to account for around 15% of the world's population. So potentially 15% of the people that you're trying to reach in your programming make it into this category. That's not small. 12% of the global population are older than 60. And it's projected there'll be nearly as many 60-plus people as children under 15 by 2050. So you've got a very big cohort that's emerging, and in some countries it's huge, of older people who have specific vulnerabilities as well. And quite often, for example, they end up becoming people with disabilities. And it's no accident that in the humanitarian sector, the disability and age representative groups, older persons representative groups, are now working closely together on joint strategies and joint guidance. It's not an accident. Indigenous people, they may be a smaller percentage of the world's population, but take a look at the statistics. These are a little data. It could be we have slightly changed, but this is the most recent that we have. So the owner-occupiers use 22% of the land service. They manage 11% of forest lands. They maintain 80% of the planet's biodiversity. If we're looking at disaster risk reduction and working with communities to help manage their hazard risks and deal with climate change issues, then we need to be much more engaged in this group. And there's a huge amount of Indigenous knowledge about disaster risk and how you can prevent it that it just gets completely ignored. Completely missed. The example that's trotted out far too often is in the after the tsunami in 2004, the Boxing Day tsunami, on an island, one of the islands off of the main island of Aceh. They had a second really bad earthquake after the first big one, and that went to that island that hadn't in the first instance. And the people there had not had a tsunami or an earthquake for over 100 years, but they had passed down a local knowledge that they just basically knew that when the earth shook badly, they needed to get to high ground. And so there was very low levels of death. And there's numerous stories like this from all around the world. So it's a source of knowledge that we ignore at our peril. And it's to our loss when we do so. Not only that, they are among the most heavily discriminated and excluded groups in the world. So just on a sheer humanity case. As we said, well, not everyone in a group, and that's already been covered, will be vulnerable. It's a large enough cohort of people to merit automatic consideration, and many humanitarian organizations are doing this now, moving into this space. That it's a big enough group and such a large amount of the people who get affected by disaster that we need to pay much closer attention to social inclusion in our designs. This is just an example of some of the information that's being generated now. UNISDR did the first global study in the world on disability and disaster preparedness in 2015. Just flash up the screens quickly. They found, you can just see the stats for yourself, 85.6% of people with disabilities have not participated in a DRM or DRR process that's currently happening in their communities, usually donor funded. Nearly 51% would have liked to participate if they'd been given the opportunity. And 72.2% did not have a personal preparedness plan, but only 20.6% believed they could evacuate immediately without difficulty. What does that tell you? So this is a pretty damning report. It's a great report, and it'll be in your resource kit. And I encourage you to take it. Another quick example of something the bank did. It was a rapid assessment done, one of these versions of a PDNA done in Thailand in 2011. A post-disaster assessment, which included a social impact analysis process that was designed by the World Bank. Found that not consulting on gender-specific needs and not having women in decision-making meant that they just weren't included in programs to replace lost farm assets and get temporary employment. Female farmers and informal laborers just missed out. Too bad. Imagine if you're a female-headed household. And many, many other programs were excluding women. The urban poor had all sorts of issues in getting access to credit to support their recovery, and pretty important findings. There was a set of recommendations that came out of that for recovery in that country. Cliff, you touched on this. This is where I'll end. That it's important to sort of get a handle on this nexus between disasters, social marginalization or exclusion, and poverty, and how they interact with each other. They have a cause-effect relationship with each other, and they interact in a way that can actually intensify the erosion of resilience. Not good. This is my attempt to capture that in a diagram. Basically, I just want to teach you a few other stats to sort of illustrate it. In terms of poverty, we have disaster-related mortality is worse in poorer countries, we know that. And we know that up to 325 million extremely poor people will be living in 49 of the world's poorest countries by 2030. So we know poverty is a factor in vulnerability to hazard impacts. And those statistics tell us that it's on a pretty big scale. We also, just to give you a particular example, someone did a study on the 1993 floods in Nepal. I have to read these ones out, I can't memorize them. The homes of low-income people were 5 times as likely to wash away as high-income people. Those whose homes were swept away were 57 times more likely to have died. Up to, yeah, that gives it to you. It's enough of that one. So, we've got that. We know that socially marginalized groups tend to be more poor, that there's higher levels of poverty among many socially marginalized groups. We've said before it's not everybody, but there is a high incidence of poverty among socially marginalized groups. And for example, 80% of all persons with disabilities live in developing countries, and the majority live in poverty. And of those people, they represent 20% of the poorest of the poor in the world. So when you start combining these, the graphs are too complicated for me to put up, so I'm trying to make a simple diagram. So you've got people's vulnerability going up from poverty. You've got social marginalization adding to their poverty. You have both of these things contributing to their vulnerability, their higher vulnerability to hazard and climate impacts. How does this one come back around the triangle? If you are vulnerable already to hazard and climate impacts, and let's say you've got social marginalization, your resilience can be eroded in a lot of ways. There are a number of examples in a number of countries where older people, after a major disaster occurred, a major hazard event, particularly in lower income households where they had real problems with access to resources, lost them, older people have been kicked out and ended up even in greater poverty and isolation. And this has happened in a number of countries. We had recent documentation of this in the recent Nepal earthquake. It's pretty horrible stuff. So you can have your vulnerability to hazards, and what happens when you're experiencing hazard events, taking you further here and further here. So all three of these things can go around in a great big circle and just keep banging off each other, reinforcing each other, and it's all leading to that. And that's the main message I'd like you to walk away with from this session, is that these things interact. This is why the bank and the GFDRR, countries that support GFDRR, are so interested and concerned about social inclusion as one of the emerging, the identification of this is emerging as a key factor in resilience. If we don't address it, we're gonna have issues with the success of our programs. If we think saving lives and properties is the end game. We need to go to lunch, so you can just read it. These are the figures that came partly out of a post-disaster needs assessment, which was followed by 3 disability and older persons organizations doing follow-up work on the impact of the earthquake on their constituencies. So poverty increased, we usually get those stats. I think there'll be 700,000 newly impoverished people, 50 to 70% from rural areas due to limited access to assets and credit markets. The majority of those were women. Impacted more heavily on socially disadvantaged. They were in the they lived in the poorer districts with the greatest losses. Of the houses lost, you can just see Dalits are a very highly discriminated group in Nepal. So 41% belong to them and other indigenous. 26 female-headed, 23% people. It was the income shocks that was just going to cause on female-headed households and women in general by the PDNA were quite high because of, again, a lack of an asset space to protect themselves and to recover and having high migrant labor populations, so their male household members were away, and so they had extremely difficult issues about recovering their assets and dealing with the response. This comes out of the joint NGO survey that's commissioned by UNDP. Response not adequate or relevant, poor access to information, limited mobility, non-inclusive programming, especially for older single women and females with disabilities. And I mentioned it already, some were abandoned by their families. And the interesting thing about community dynamics in heterogeneous communities, the more socially powerful and higher caste people had greater access to these, but where the community was homogenous, the distribution was not fair. So it tells you again about discrimination happening in those processes. Someone mentioned it earlier, and it's alluded to in that sheet. The good news is this doesn't have to be what we'll be looking at after lunch. In Bangladesh, there was a horrific death rate from their in Cyclone Gorky in the 90s, 14-to-1 ratio of women to men. You already talked about the reasons why that happened, saris and lack of mobility. Now 5-to-1 in Cyclone Sidr. And it's because there was a conscientious effort made by the government, by organizations working there, by the agencies that supported them, to find out first why women didn't want to use the shelters. It's good to ask that question. And it led to creating a cadre of female community mobilizers and creating women-only spaces that they felt safe and comfortable. Same as having livestock, and I hope we see the day when SOGI issues are addressed there too, because it's a real horror story of people being turned away from shelters or not being beaten up, raped, not able to use the shelters. And this is just an example that of some research that comes out of some research that GFDRR funded in the case of children, because children, male and female, and of different groups can also be quite vulnerable. And it's to show the flip side I mentioned before about capacity and about not underestimating the contributions people can make. These kids contributed to helping basically their families learn how to protect themselves from flood hazards. So I never underestimate people. And these are a few pieces of research that have been done on how to address some of these different issues. Out of GFDRR. And you'll have them in the resources. Quick and dirty. We need to get some lunch. Any comment before lunch, or are you just dying to get that sandwich? Go for the sandwich.
Thank you.
Could I ask if you could be ready to come back at 1:15?
Yeah.
That feel right?
Yeah.
We'll just explain to you what we'll do with that case study. It was just to get some of you started on the reading. So if I just briefly interrupt your reading, I'll just show you what we're going to do. And basically, it's read it through. This is a true story. And followed from a massive earthquake. I think most people in the room would be familiar with the 2010 Haiti earthquake. So this is a story about what happened to LGBT people. One of the few examples of a documented story. This is a case study of bad practice. We will follow this with a case study of good practice. So we're going to look at one of each. So basically, quickly read through it and have a discussion about what we think are the main lessons learned and how you think these lessons could be adapted and incorporated into the kind of programming that the World Bank does and also the kind of things that GFDRR funds. How could you avoid what happened in Haiti or help prevent it from happening in the work you do in the future? That's the challenge.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
You should be getting close to finish your skim over of it and ready to start your discussion pretty soon. What do you think?
Start.
I just wonder why it's because yeah.
I think
There's poor documentation of this in most countries. This is one of the first studies that's ever been done. And it's not that it's not happening, it's just it's not being reported. And it's not being captured in empirical evidence. There's very little research that's been done on LGBTI issues in disasters. And what little there is mostly coming out of, to my surprise, Australia and New Zealand, where I'm from, and a little bit from the US. And they're doing a bit, the Australian and New Zealand universities are doing a bit of research in the Pacific region in Indonesia. So I think it's more that it's a case that it's invisible. You know how we talked about this morning about how people get excluded? Well, these people are invisible because they've got issues with the law. It's not illegal to be homosexual in Haiti, but as it says in the case study, there are tremendous issues already ordinarily of violence against LGBTI people without a disaster. The same as for gender-based violence for women, say women and men who are straight, put it that way. You've got those exacerbated pressures that come after disaster, tempers flaring, mental health issues, people drinking more, taking more drugs to cope. This does go up after disasters anywhere. And where you have stigmatized groups like this, who tend to be attacked, at the best of times, they're going to become even more visible targets.
But of course, there was the issue.
So the story you're seeing there, I suspect, if we actually had solid research, we would see this story from many other disaster contexts.
And the NGO and its services were destroyed. That was my challenge, right? Then they gave us examples of active discrimination and access to relief services. And then they went to examples of violence, both against women, lesbians.
Yeah, it's a continuation of what they're facing ordinarily anyway.
So those are all things that are common issues.
I don't think anyone's done that kind of numbers. Don't know how similar they are, but the main message there is something pretty bad was happening to these people because of who they were. And cases of stigmatized groups all around the world being denied access to relief, yep, some of them are well documented, being denied also access to recovery resources, becoming victims of violence. You saw the statistics this morning after a disaster because of the pressures. Gender-based violence and domestic violence and lots of forms of violence increase quite dramatically, and WHO has documented a lot of this.
Men who don't have female household members can get national cards. And this whole idea of zero aid on this community are you maybe your intentions focused on actively ended up discriminating against very whole other. So I think they just like to be like made less. You can't just like shine the spotlight. And you're talking about earlier the gaps that it's just it says here that homosexuality is not a crime under the penal code, but everything
in an unnatural social situation. Yeah. Yeah, we have lots.
It's like you
fragmentation of
that's just the answering the problem.
Many forms of discrimination. In this case, for the purposes of this exercise, we're focusing on what happened to this particular group. No, they don't know the actual population.
Yeah. Which means you probably have a much bigger, most stuff goes unreported.
But I think it's like the same with the way I read it is similar to any other shock. When there was war, these cases, presumably in other countries it happens that they increase as well. So I think it's just the shock itself just exacerbates an existing inequality or discriminatory practice. And just in this case happens to be something that was documented. Oftentimes perhaps the challenge is having a baseline which you can then see, okay, so it went up because of the shock. Because it's always in hindsight when these things are being written, but I would imagine intuitively that any shock is going to increase or exacerbate the already existing inequalities and
discrimination and violence.
And I think the goal is, knowing this, try and design programs that either do not make the situation any worse than it already is, or even make sure that at least these things don't become much worse or more pronounced than they usually are. I think that's probably the design of the goal of any DRM program, or it should be the goal.
For example, many actions have been identified to improve the protection of women and children who are stuck in camps, like many of the people are in Haiti.
But I think one thing
by doing analysis, by doing a really good analysis, getting some more information, talking to people involved, actions became identified over the years that could be done, such as improving the lighting in the bathing areas, which reduced the degree of sexual assault. So that's now for many organizations a common practice now once they became aware that this was happening. There are policies about how distribution lines are run to ensure that different groups are included. In this case, it went wrong. In the attempt to assist one group, another group got affected. And that comes back to what you're saying about fragmentation. If your analysis is not holistic, your social analysis, if it's just one group, you'll miss all. Remember that slide I put up with all the bubbles of people's different identities? A good social analysis incorporates a gender analysis as well, but it looks at the whole range of groups in society who might potentially be left over, might be harmed in these kinds of situations. And then say, okay, what can we do? I mean, I guess the first question I would ask is, do you think that's a desirable situation to be in? Do you think that's just something that happens and we can't stop it?
Outside of Egypt response situations. For example, when the safeguards Africa is this even taken into account? Like when you're doing a social assessment or the social impact analysis, I mean, that's the stuff that I does. It doesn't have to be in the context of disaster or state, and I do this. But I'm investing in this country, and which is why I'm doing a social impact analysis. At that point, how do you really
so how could you unpack crime to know who's getting affected by what kinds of crimes post-disaster, and what you could do to target your security measures to reach different groups more?
Consultations generally that doesn't happen.
Many things were going on in this case.
But all the other work that happens, is this community right to consultations? Are there safe spaces for consultations? Because
No.
like this,
It's quite common in Haiti for police to, and it's quite common in many countries for straight people to rape gay people.
our project teams working on topics different reasons for consultations and so on. So I'm just thinking about, just our general things against
I think that what you're saying, or seeing what happens on the rest of the operation, it does help. I mean, obviously, if the country is more advanced on these issues and it has the gaps are
the way I read it,
other countries,
also maybe
better response
to try and get to an
if
answer.
I think about it from the DRM
as opposed to trying to
I would separate
solve
two
an
things.
existing
One is the
problem
aftermath,
that was
what
there
happens
before
immediately
the
after a disaster.
disaster happened.
Yeah.
I think this to me illustrated a problem in the design of how
I would
we do the
agree
relief.
that
That
it's
it
very
made the
difficult.
situation
You
or
get in
it
a
reinforced
very fast pace. There is no
existing
room for
inequality.
consultation,
And made it worse.
So maybe the thinking is to design, how do you design, in this case, relief efforts so that they at least don't make the situation worse, but in other case actually help improve the targeting of resources to everyone equally. And I think that's the point. I mean, what you're saying about sort of addressing the core issue, I think that requires a more longer term and perhaps even policy-based solution that, at the time of a disaster is just difficult to do. So I think that to me it illustrated that you're trying to solve one problem and they want to cater for one aspect of it, then they exacerbated another one. So how do you design response and relief so that you don't make the situation worse at best, or even make it even better? I think that's the takeaway.
Can you think of some steps when you were working with governments on designing their
what needs to be done, and it's done in partnership with others. So
steps that could be taken?
if we think about these things,
Any situation like
when the disaster hit, you already have it in mind.
1,000.
Going back on what you said earlier about how we can try to build that subsidize policy to follow. So I'm assuming how to find champions that like this active about identifying and providing information. I'm just curious what kind of allies that can be thought about when you're doing the
It's probably not necessarily any health center, but every country has a national needs program, and that's doing stuff within the health system. And so with those folks, easily in every country, say these are the SOGI-related NGOs, because this is where they are in the country. So there's a way of finding that information. And I think something a couple of you have said is really critical. And that is that how we the response is not just one thing, right? It's a series of preparation. When suddenly something happens and everything has to kick in. And then it's about what are we doing now that we're trying to make sure there's a proper recovery that leads to better sustainable development.
Design of a camp is one of the start points. That's one entry point. Yeah, for a whole lot of different groups.
I think
it's really the question of who you engage in.
So I kind of understanding the
asking the question
and understanding the different vulnerabilities. You have to understand them too, like
then that's going to be a key part of the solution in every step of RM. But if the questions are not asked, they're not invited to the consultations, it'll never be on the agenda. And I would just remind that for the World Bank, of course, context is important for us. So who's marginalized in the country? We always look at that, right? In our country, is it certain ethnic minorities? Is it certain religious minorities? Etc. That's going to be different depending on the country, the context, and its history. However, for the bank, in every country, the issues that we know need to be addressed are gender inequality. That's not context specific. People with disabilities, marginalization and leaving out people with disabilities. Indigenous people, and now the most recently SOGI, based on
having standard operating procedures that
it's not that we're saying you have to
and that recognize different vulnerabilities and come up with strategies, appropriate strategies.
Context, figure out who is put there in terms of marginalization, and never leave out ones with
Yeah, and I think that, for example, is especially relevant on, for example, all the work that is being done on social safety net. But then, there is the adaptive part when a disaster hits, how you, if you are not tapping to that net, then you are not in the net. That's it. I mean, so, there is a lot of work that can be done beforehand. But,
how do you do that?
In an aftermath of a disaster.
How do you find that out?
Stop and think through, because there are many things going on.
Often I think sometimes from a desk-based review first, to then seeing what the gaps are and seeing if there's resources that need to go into, finding out more specifically if there's a gap in the literature or analytics or whatever, doing something to find some assessment. Then, from then that informs how you design and implement to the best of, I guess, your knowledge at that point. But it does start with sort of having an understanding of what existing literature is there, analytics, and what is the context. What's the context, yeah.
What's another way you could find out the context as well?
Well,
this was done by a local and an international partner, this study, a local LGBTI group, together with, or actually it was 2 or 3 of them, together with an international group that came in actually based out of the US.
So we haven't had before, we'll have now, is we will have a social guidance itself. So if any of you followed the safeguards discussions, you know that at the end of the day, SOGI was not the explicit language of the safeguards that were adopted. But the bank, particularly through its leadership in some parts of the board, pushed hard that had to be ultimately implemented, adopted otherwise, and a compromise.
I would say it's one of the most challenging areas, I think.
Bank staff can't require the client. Bank staff will have obligations, responsibilities.
And as you said, setting it up in a way that it has to be safe to participate too for your partners. There's lots of techniques, and there's people skilled in doing this, in working with groups in a safe way, and individuals to collect, also for people in the field and do field-based service, collect information, and to create a safe space to talk about uncomfortable issues. It's the same for gender-based violence. You have the same sorts of problems that people are at risk if you expose them sometimes, and of worse things happening, or you could open up traumas for them that are very hard for them to manage. And if you're not a counselor, you might be adding to their stresses and problems. So that's the sort of work that when I was younger, I used to work with the Red Cross when we did early recovery needs assessments. We had to have very special methodology, special way interview techniques and methods for accessing hard to reach groups or at-risk groups. It can be any range of things.
That we make sure that on the frameworks that we are using or the guidelines that we are using, we have these things.
How would you say? I'd be curious.
And one thing that might be useful.
This is something that's pretty much never been very much on the radar in most DRM that I've seen. It's starting to come on stream in a few, including the international.
I don't know because I'm not the social
specialist. If there was another earthquake in Haiti, knowing what you know now, and you were sending out a PDNA from GFDRR, how would you tackle this?
It's very much male-dominated, very technical, sometimes on hard infrastructure and that sort of things. And I think that's an always one possibility to think of. So it's always important to think that there is a learning curve there. So we need to document those things because clearly here some of the mistakes that were made are unintentional. But that is still harmful.
But I agree with you, and just sort of take it perhaps a step further because I think in terms of this, I think we all agree that this is sort of describing the immediate aftermath of disaster, so the response where the bank has sort of a limited focus. But I think if we try to take it to the next phase, sort of the recovery phase, where we try to start, thinking about.
Well, I mean, I was thinking of it from at least from.
I think that's one area.
I was thinking about the social impact assessment that yes, maybe it has come to contribution to the aggregate value of the PDA. It's very small, but just the very fact that the data is being collected and it's part of the dialogue and understanding of disaster assessment, then I think that's a starting point. Because then you move from there to having a conversation with the government about how to prioritize resources and how it's going to go about doing this recovery. Then I think social aspects are already on the table. I think it's easier than not having them at all, and then having to start saying, okay, we need to make sure that we take into account different,
And you can, with the right methodology, you can do some cost estimates. There's a guy, Roberto Hovens, who designed the part of the original methodology that preceded PDNA, and we've discussed this at length in the past, and he's been trying to work through ways you can quantify. Some of the stuff that gets quantified in a PDNA is quite loose. I've been on them, and I've seen how it's been done, and I've seen governments doctor the information like mad. So you end up trying to put together estimates and aggregates and compensate for all sorts of error. You know the deal. You can also incorporate a certain amount of quantitative estimating on some of the social stuff. It's a bit of a myth that you can't. And there's a guy named Robert Chambers in the UK who pioneered some work in this area. So you have to have some qualitative information, but you can mix it with your quantitative. I don't know how you could have a PD&A that doesn't set the economic figures into context anyway.
My response would be, I think that's back to, like, it depends what TTL you're working with, right? I mean, I think if it's a TTL who understands that some of these issues can actually have an impact on the project's impact, or an effect on the project's impact, then the TTL would see it as his or her responsibility in their own interest to probably work with the social safeguards person and the social specialist to incorporate and to address some of these issues, ensure that you have wider consultations and that these consultations reach out to all these marginalized groups. But I think if you have a TTL,
the Haiti floods a few years before the earthquake, we went into a household survey and extrapolated and developed a baseline out of that. And it's not perfect, but a lot of stuff that gets done isn't perfect.
Yes, we've done it.
So there's a lot of governments still don't disaggregate their data, and that's a part of the dialogue probably too, isn't it? About working with governments.
And will again also depend on, maybe even the manager then asking the right questions and requiring that accountability from the TTL and saying, look, this is actually a core bank issue and we want this to be on the agenda.
Have to wrap it up now?
Oh yeah, I had to move to balance out the tables.
Yeah.
It's still like up to details to sort of decide.
Okay,
Like,
tell us a bit about your discussions. Let's start with this group here.
When the safeguard person will kind of make sure that you are.
Sorry. Yeah. Can you tell us a bit about your discussion? Just a few of the highlights.
I didn't bring anyone.
What do you think are the lessons learned, and what do you think how do you think you could adapt them into GFDRR and World Bank Group's work? You have to really shout out in this room.
So in terms of the lessons learned, I think we were all kind of deliberating on the fact that some of these consequences were unintended consequences of the people trying to take good actions. So they were looking at past experiences or past lessons which showed them, distributing aid supplies to women helps in getting to everybody in the family, etc., without realizing that there were groups that were actively discriminated against because of that very policy. So one of the things we were talking about is, the main lesson where we have to start looking outside of the whole kind of this idea of spotlighting on just a few issues and a few communities based on past experiences, maybe not realizing that all experiences have been taken into account. And a lot of the comments were general variation around that theme. But the main discussion we had on was the adaptation of those lessons and so on. And one of the things we discussed is the example is really about that immediate response phase, where maybe the bank's role may be more limited. However, the bank plays a big role when it comes to all of the other phases of DRM, so essentially preparedness and recovery. And that's a place where there can be a strong effort. So, for example, we were talking about the post-disaster needs assessment. How do you make sure that communities that are discriminated against because of their sexual orientation or gender identity, are their needs being taken into account? So that was one example. In terms of the preparedness processes, even sensitization of police officers, protection officers, or thinking about making sure that consultations are inclusive, providing safe spaces for persons to raise these issues, or figuring out who are the community organizations or civil society organizations that work on these issues. So building those alliances prior to a response, immediate response phase, as well as the recovery context. So, for example, when the bank is investing in new construction, new roads, new shelters, new bridges, or whatever, how are these issues being taken into account then? We spoke a bit about the ESF and the ongoing, the safeguards process. Are these communities really being highlighted in the the social impact analysis that's done, or the social assessment that's done?
If it's done.
If it's hopefully done. But as Cliff mentioned, these things are specific to the country context. Different countries have different groups that face different vulnerabilities, but we are seeing increasingly that the 4 groups that should be included in every assessment are, issues rather, are gender, disability, Indigenous people, and social. So I think there's a lot the bank can do outside of this immediate response phase that can help to avoid these harmful practices.
That was very comprehensive. I think these guys have been working hard. They've covered a lot. Well done. Well done, you. I'm going to ask just if you have anything new to add to what they say to add from your group. So just anything additional to what measures they identified.
I think there were 2 from the...
You're going to have to go raise the voice again. Sorry.
Yeah, I think there were 2 key issues that we need to address from this lesson. One is how to target the right people. The second was how to reduce the discrimination. And so the strategies that we came up with, okay, how do we make sure that we're not just targeting women, we're not excluding some of the community. So one is when you register, make it a lot more, when people come to the camps, make it a lot more neutral, gender-wise, like identify who the head of households are to give the ration card, instead of saying only women, not saying only this, that, so that if you're LGBT and you're the head of household, then you still get the ration card for the thing. And then having a grievance mechanism, which is in more secluded areas where people feel more comfortable coming to give grievances. And then one thing that was also mentioned was Margaret was like making sure you have a partnership with a local NGO who knows the social norms and social biases that people might have, so that you know how to where to locate your tents, where to locate your latrines, where to locate things, so that people are more comfortable accessible. And then for discrimination, one of the ways that we thought we could address this whole issue of discrimination is empower groups, give them leadership positions so that they have a place to voice their opinions or their issues, so they're not marginalized. So empowerment is one, and then have safe places. I think you also mentioned safe places, but for example, for mothers who are in child rearing age, or if they have young children looking after, have a special tent put together where they can take care of the children, help each other, so that if they need someone to look after their child, they can go and, someone else can go for them, or whatever it is. Having that group thing where they have safe space, a special tent for that maybe, or something like that. And then along the lines, having a lot more just bringing up the tent, not tent, but the camp together and having awareness raising sessions where it's very clear that there's zero tolerance for this kind of activity, and to prevent, persistently give that message so that even if it's socially normal to discriminate, that in this spot it's not acceptable.
Okay. Quick point.
I just want to say one quick thing about the relief versus recovery and the humanitarian versus development divide, because more and more, people don't chop things up into these artificial phases that we do, and it's easy for us to say the bank is not a relief organization. But we are usually on the ground from day one, if not shortly thereafter. We have actually just, was it last week, I think, just signed an agreement with the UN and the bank on how we work together in emergencies. And we do also need to remember that, displacement is, both due to conflict and disasters, is very normally protracted these days, right? Average is 17 years. So we're talking more and more with our UN counterparts and other agencies around developmental solutions, durable solutions, sustainable solutions to these emergencies, which are usually protracted. In the DRM community, we have a saying also, any temporary housing becomes permanent, so don't think of this as, when you start putting people in the camps, where you place those camps affects where you can rebuild. So all these decisions get mixed together. And we need to think about how we can help our clients affect those decisions. We have development policy operations where we're talking about the systems and regulations and institutions we put in place for disaster response and recovery. And there's other ways other entry points we can intervene in. So this one, I'd say, don't think of it as, we don't do the part. We aren't humanitarians, but we do engage with those actors in those spaces.
Okay, good point. Last but not least, group in the middle. Anything to add additional to what the others have said?
We recognize this case study as a good example of recording something happening for LGBT people. I mean, that's just impact on this. We find very rare cases that recorded in comprehensive manner like this. So we discuss how we can collect this kind of information as case by case story in safe environment, because particularly LGBT issue is very private topic and not necessarily all the people willing to talk. And this is not only related to LGBT case, but one of these rape cases, for example, even as a kind of it happened for straight people. It's saying, not necessarily all the people are courage enough to talk about it in front of everybody. So how we can make sure to provide a kind of safe environment to collect this information and inform the policy process. That's what we discuss.
Doing assessments of what the situation is, but with sensitivity to the risks, potential risks, and traumas for the people involved. And I think we also talked a bit about the in a PD&A, for example, if you're trying to do some sort of social impact analysis, having the right people with the right skills to cover those sorts of issues. Okay, in your folders, just for your interest, you will find a list of the recommendations made by the LGBT groups that were involved in producing this report and this study. And just for your interest, we won't read them out or go through them, but just for your own interest, you can see what they recommended, both for the shorter and the longer terms. So they also looked outside the disaster itself to some of those discrimination topics that we touched on as well in the discussions. So I'll leave that with you just for your own interest to see how close you were to them from their own. And that's LGBT people from inside Haiti working with an international partner saying what they think needs to happen in Haiti. Okay. We will now move on to a good practice case study. Something a bit more happy, I think. I certainly found that there are so few examples of that kind of research on sexual orientation. I really did find that. But if you read the whole report, I trimmed the 20-page report down to 2. It's really confronting. The interviews they did, what people said, what happened to them. It's powerful stuff. Okay. So we're doing back-to-back case studies. Now we're going to look at the good practice one. This, by the way, is a little cartoon that I found, which kind of expresses how, in the report, the Haitian LGBT community felt. They were being blamed by a lot of people for the disaster. Okay, so in your folder, you will find another case study. And that case study is called Disability Inclusive Flood Protection. And it's the same deal. Have a quick read through of it. Just take about 10 minutes to skim it.
have a look at this interesting story and have a quick discussion on what you think were the best features of this particular program, and in what ways do you think that experience could be adapted to the context of the World Bank and GFDRR program?
Should be getting close to the end of the reading by now.
Oh. I don't know. Yeah, that's why it's kind of. Large out there. Oh, that's a good idea. We should have done that. Okay, should be close to starting up the conversation.
So, what do you think, Bert?
Mr.
It's very complete, actually. It's like multidimensional.
Yeah,
It's very
but
comprehensive. Yeah, we had pretty.
but for me, like,
I mean, like,
the,
I think our meeting is
regarding the social inclusion, what I think is very nice is like they form the new organization. It's like Water Disaster Management Committee, because like it's written the first 3 women was just receiving the service and they didn't include it in the decision making. But they because if just do some existing organization try to do work for disaster risk management, I think the majority just continue to, let's say, make a decision there. But if they make a new organization and the women can start join from the start, so I think they can be involved in more decision making, and also not only women but also the PWD people can be involved in the result. What I've heard.
They really thought through a system.
Yeah.
I also find very interesting what they talk about how the moment that they try to include women with disabilities, there was a specific challenge with them that had nothing to do with the disability itself, but with the fact that they were not used to make decisions. So it was difficult to get them to the point that they felt the ownership of the decisions and how much they can actually influence it. And I wonder, if that's something that social specialists come across with, especially when we are talking with the most vulnerable or marginalized populations, based on what you said this morning, where I think it was Charlotte who said that you lose your aspirations. You limit yourself, and this is not for me to decide.
Come to accept your
Stakeholders,
really
try to
try
to bring back the confidence rather than just writing infrastructure.
One thing I would like to emphasize is
It was another level.
training activities for different entities. There was so for disability awareness and inclusive DRR on other topics as well. Has been a series of capacity building activities. Partnerships are
strength was
it NGOs or
Oh yeah.
so that for state kind of bonds that's one thing that kind of stood out to me.
Something that keeps
introducing local knowledge.
I think that one thing that's also interesting is because many times one thing is this whole issue of participation, that you want to ensure that at least 40% of the female that are represented in a committee or whatever are female, but then you sort of miss the point of how you have to build confidence and everything for them to actually have a role in that committee. Because in previous projects I used to work on before that I always came across that the presentation on paper looked nice, like when I was there in the committees, but then the women, they did not speak up, it was only the men that actually talked. And here I like the component of actually you have to also build that confidence for them to be able to sort of use that role that they have and to be engaged, because I think that's something that many projects miss. They ensure that they have the 40% women thing, and then still that doesn't lead to a change is made, because you don't sort of you have to equip them with the skill set or whatever for them to be able to then take advantage of the so I think that's
It's a community-driven development project in the Philippines that's been operating for many years. It's a disaster. Based on hard learning in early years, we've been doing an increasingly better and better job.
Webinars,
Information, marginalized women, and marginalized indigenous groups, building decision-making systems of government locally. So that's really been just a broader experience that we're now trying to replicate.
and plus it also gives you a sense of there are groups and there are
disasters management.
right? I mean,
yeah, it's not scaled up.
I only find that
Completely agree with everything you say. One of the things that jumped off to me was it almost seems like they tried to take
those who
account of the patients not and the rights to access land where they don't necessarily represent. So the person
all the other the real experience, they're urban, they're often
denied entry to these states. They were kind of looking
but as you say, it's
just building an accessible stream or building an accessible.
and it's your knowledge from
And it's very interesting.
your ability
I think to reflect your point of view. It's almost now kind of becoming mainstreamed into their larger processes, it seems like. So, for example, the union now recognizes the World Disaster Management. Looking at allocating funds for disability to GFDRR at ward levels. It's almost they took these lessons from very targeted intervention and realized that they could try and make it mainstream and really jump on.
But then done. You go back and they're like, yeah, I used to
Understood. And to me, that's, like,
because what happened is
what you, I don't know how you describe it right now with which words, but
There was
the fact
also
that
a part
it covers so
where
many
it
aspects,
said,
like,
like,
from the
about
housing,
by helping
land,
people with disabilities, not just
I mean,
about
I think of it if these were a bank project, that would mean involving
helping them
a lot of different units. So I wonder how they managed to coordinate it so that everything seemed to fit so well, because I think in our case sometimes it's like the lack of internal communication sometimes it makes these kind of best practices complicated. Yeah. And we should learn from others that manage to do it better.
And I think another component that is very important here is actually the participation at all stages of the cycle as well. Not only at the beginning. That seems to be at least where we experience that you may have like a consultation
one way
first and maybe you have like at the end of the project.
I'm not exactly sure how it
Again, but I think that the constant feedback that they got here, that the participants were able to actually
but it's a form of
always, that they were involved
psychosocial support.
throughout the
How
project,
would
also
you
sort of
measure?
improves it because they,
Yeah, the bank would
then
like
they
to
can like learn from
oftentimes talk about
what went wrong, etc. And then
before
they
and
have
after
the
and the
opportunity
metrics,
to
and
just
trying to think of how you would articulate that
within
at the end of the project,
instead of like
the issue of confidence and
ended and
psychosocial support you provide in the project and how that was beneficial.
Having like feedback mechanisms.
Ideally, you'd want this to be something that someone else takes away and can use. I'm just curious how that is captured and how that is documented.
World Bank program. Do you think there's scope to do things like that?
There are some measures there, but it's very hard.
I want to believe that, yes. I want to believe that, yes, that there is room for it. But I don't think it's necessarily easy. I think that now, and maybe I'm wrong, I don't know how other sectors are seeing it, but I think that now that we are talking a lot about resilient development, I think that we are getting there are more interest from other sectors, other development sectors, on how to make their projects resilient. So I think that leads to certain collaboration that might help us, that a typical infrastructure project or a transport project now.
Like sort of, I'm guessing some sort of surveys were done.
They are starting to consider it.
That could
But this
have
is a very
satisfaction
complex,
surveys or something.
I mean,
perhaps
there are
done.
so many angles here, and I think the bank is so big and at the same time it's so turfy. That is big and turfy. I mean, I think there are a lot of difficulties in terms of getting running, but that's just my impression. I think
These things take time. We're talking about very complex, big changes in ways of doing business and ways government and that doesn't happen.
no, and then managers as well as TTLs, we all have, the objectives based on our performance evaluation that we have to follow there are a lot of tensions. So to make people get out of their way to add something that might delay their project or that might affect the rating of the manager and how many projects they manage to get on board. Those kind of things play role here and can be a barrier actually.
Sometimes you have to break it down into stages and accept what can we realistically achieve this time around.
Exactly.
One I mentioned before, it's the CDD program. It's been going for 15 years, and it's taken all that time for them to reach a point from a developmental point of bringing in communities and marginalized groups into decision making and into programming. That's taken place over 3 phases. So when they ended the first phase and they evaluated, things have happened, but something's not happened at all. And being realistic about what you can achieve and how you're building blocks.
But in many ways,
over time, because these kind of changes do not happen. But they can be done. And I've seen it with the development sector of the bank and the Philippines one. They're now taking that fantastic framework that they were building up over many years, and they're now applying disaster risk management inside of it, and gender sensitivity in their case, disaster risk management is being designed and implemented into that program. That's a systematic program. There's others like it, where there's a lot that's there.
No, we want this young guy because
from the developmental about how, again, there's no perfect program, there's always some issues, it just takes a while, but it's a pretty good program. That this could be a thing. That's the reality. You follow my belief is you can be all the same models or similar models.
I have another general question. For the GMCs, is it? Do you have a sense of how the proportion of the 25 members, of which 10% were persons with disabilities and 30% were women? Is that how is that determined?
And it has a lot of risks, social risk at the same time. No? Like we talk on the value capture of land. You know what happens when you make land more resilient. The possibility that goes down the road badly, that it triggers more exclusion of the vulnerable population and start gentrification process. I mean, I think it's a risk, but there is also a huge opportunity once you get into this big urban arena. So, I mean, I think the trade-offs are how well we do it and how is our feedback to be able to correct anything that starts going wrong.
There's tools and information to guide you. I actually wrote for the bank tool on
so I don't know why they would have to.
Lots of stuff that would help.
I would think so, yeah. I was just curious whether there was. I'm sure there's a process behind it.
I'm sure they came to this in some way.
It's like a standalone disability DRR program. Then it's sort of easier in a way to think about like all components. But what when you're supposed to like integrate this into like a big national DRM program that has like many other components as well, then I think the challenge really, that's what makes it difficult. And I guess that's what you meant about like by scale, like how do we sort of integrate this as a component in a whole big, DRM investments. And based on just the fact that dealing with, I've been working a bit on gender issues in GFDRR, like how, that it seems like a very long way, to get there. Some sort of, I don't know.
So some thoughts, for example, like when you're talking about this, focusing on personal disabilities, I think about elderly communities and benefits. Women who are carrying 2 children and going to elderly,
Yeah.
So, like GSURR is only like 10% of the seniority. It doesn't have to be designed. It doesn't necessarily mean that you can understand design for. I mean, just general. Exactly. How do you convince people? They pick down, is there any population and we have resources. But this is the thing, like a lot of these are just good examples. I mean, if you're looking at ensuring that people don't slip when they are in land, it's just good design
they're trying to bring in.
Imagine the difference in some of these flood water and hydroelectric infrastructure projects that we were able to build in some of the accessible design.
Yeah, but I do feel like on one point that you mentioned, just
all know
one of the
society
things,
right?
violence is sort of started on is paid for this individual
But as things
that may not be sustainable. So what happens when this funding goes away, and there are 5 more houses are not able to pay for themselves? And I think that this is big thinking about that's how to integrate all of these elements. Like, are you going to pay for who's going to pay for the repair and maintenance? It did say that they are skilling labor, but right now they're not. So 3 years later, if they need like I think that's one aspect of it. Equally hard and you are very easily for any other country and say, oh, this happened here, they did it in 18 homes.
This is also
this is sort of very
I know.
Yeah.
It's really important. And also recognize that
after the tsunami disaster, I was working for the Red Cross for the Pacific, and we received more money than any organization in the world. The World Bank didn't have the money we had, no money we had, and it was private donations of $2 billion contributed worldwide to the community. And we suddenly found ourselves with way more money than we ever used to deal with. So this was a major issue of absorption for us. But the logical thing was that we got involved in housing, and in some cases it had to be so we were involved in housing and rebuilding communities, so not just houses, but the community can look at because of buildings and infrastructure. And a number of our societies teamed up together. Organizations that are far more experienced in inclusive approaches to physical design communities. So we came together with organizations like Handicap International, years of experience in this stuff, and extremely experienced to produce a lot of good guidance. And they trained, they first they put us in contact with local groups.
People may not have at all.
How did they see the
So there's a differentiation
built? Then we worked together with the architects and engineers.
It does play itself out.
Together with these organizations, trained those people in becoming more aware of these issues, brought them together with their clients as they call them down. And people could build infrastructure down to organize dialogue.
Yes,
in a number of communities in a number of countries, which works everywhere.
You are 44 different
yeah, and you're telling them that this is hundreds of millions of dollars. So like that's I'm going to write this very clearly. We won't come. I had to go do absolutely. Usually our test is held in the and I came back from this and you wouldn't really see some of these changes.
And then you have a lot of
so they were designing for disabilities. So I'm not saying elderly people, and they were ecstatic. We were trying to talk about a whole bunch of things that have been done. And they kept coming back to us. Grab bars in the bathroom are just great because they had squat toilets. I can tell you I'm older
I can only do that so long to bring in that. And I just kept coming back to it every time. Let's grab ours, I just grab. That costs hardly anything to add. So there are, it's different scales. That's housing, and a lot of support and sanitation. There's also other building schools. What do people think? There's lots of school safety programs that do that.
And I agree very to the fact that it's embedded. The more the thing that I
okay, so we might wrap it up now. And just still going. Come to this time, please. Okay. I'd like to wrap this one up. Have a quick break for a quick cup of coffee after, and then we'll run through when we come back some of the entry points and some examples from programs and similar programs and things that have been done. So I want to keep it really short and sweet this round. This table first, a very fast and pithy summary. Guys, can we get your attention?
Talk about a lot of things. Okay, well, I'll try and summarize what we talked about. Talked about a lot of.
Voice.
I think they can hear me.
They couldn't over here.
Sorry. We talked about a lot of things. I think we acknowledge, of course, that the project was designed to engage at the local level by working and training obviously the people with disabilities and women in general on DRM. So it's looking at it from that perspective and also engaging the community at large through the DMCs to also understand the issues and the impacts of the project on people with disabilities. So just working at it, tackling the problem from both sides, building capacity of the sort of the target population, if you will, and as well as the broader audience and building awareness that way. We also talked about aspects of how the project provided on the issue of confidence and building up confidence. I don't know if that's a correct term, but sort of psychosocial support through the trainings, but it was an active sort of part of the project to ensure that the people with disabilities and women have the confidence and are able to also make sure that as it relates to ownership of property and their rights, that they're able to have access to those and reduce the discriminatory practices that may happen in terms of eviction or after the reconstruction or renovation. And then we had a few different questions. I mean, that's what I can think of right now, but we also had a number of questions that we talked about, primarily around perhaps on how some of the targeting was done in terms of the group compositions in the DMCs, how maybe Keiko, you want to add here because you actually had many of the questions. Yeah, I mean, that's one I can think of now because that's one that I asked. But
I think you also questioned about how to measure.
Yeah.
I think that was.
Yeah, we're
Sorry,
talking.
could you say that just slightly louder? So
Sorry. How to measure confidence level that this project helped to improve?
In terms of how the project mentions that confidence levels were improved for the women, the question was around how they went about perhaps assessing this. And at least when we were discussing, I didn't think it really came through, but we probably thought maybe it could be before and after satisfaction surveys, or just day-to-day working with the local communities and assessing how their sort of confidence levels have improved from the beginning of the project until sort of where the project is now.
I believe they were also assessing speaking in meetings and things like that. I think that's good. and I might just go to the next slides. Do you have anything new to add to what they came up with? Additional?
I don't think in additional. I think I covered everything.
I don't know if you said anything about the participation of the community, like at all stages of the project cycle. That they were involved, so that they could also improve the design and implementation and the evaluation. That they were. I think that's a very important aspect to highlight, because many projects tend to focus on just maybe doing like a consultation at the beginning or and at the end of the project, instead of having that constant feedback. That I think is very crucial.
I believe this group had a discussion about scaling up in a bank context. Can you do something like that at a larger scale?
You were the one that brought the question.
No, you brought the question up, and I decided it was a good question. So, Christina, why don't you give some thoughts on that?
No, so we were discussing on how this project is very multidimensional, and in an institution like ours, where it's so big and so turfy in a way, how can we actually go to a point where we have this similar experience at the larger scale of what we're working. So we were discussing a bit, what do we think are like challenges and opportunities to actually for us to cooperate with other teams, because not one single unit actually approaches all the different angles that are covered here. So it's a multidisciplinary effort. We didn't have the solution.
There are a few examples of taking aspects of this from within the bank from the development sector that you could draw from, particularly in community-driven development operations and social funds and areas like that. They have long experience in developing some of these processes, and we've got some toolkits that we will share with you about how to extrapolate them into disaster.
So the process and everything we discussed, I think the only two things that we want to add is your second question: what needs improvement, what could be improved, and how could the lesson be improved. So one of the things that I mentioned about what could be improved is the whole process was facilitated by outside. None of the sure they're trained in Masons, which is excellent. They did all this processing. But it was done by them, the NGOs, the facilitation. Therefore, if they left, the communities weren't left with the ability to organize themselves and do the facilitation themselves. So it ended up, it looks like, I don't know, it just looks like misleading. It ended up more like a one-off process that wasn't scaled up to other wards or other, So, because if it was going to be scaled up, they would have had to have the NGO go and do it again. So that was one concern. The other one was that since scale up as World Bank, take it more to a national level discussion on doing this activity, making more policy or making more regulations or more whatever legislation, whatever, to make this a more national level process or national level program rather than just a one-off.
Those are the real questions. Real issues. Scaling up is a challenge.
That's what I'm cool. Like, yes, they said something about creating a disaster management committee, but I've seen so many of these disaster management committees be created because the project was there, and then they disappear once the project is there. Unless they're given real responsibility. They said they'll allocate funds, but it's not the committee managing this time, so it's unless they have a true daily responsibility doing something.
You'll be pleased to know that they did do an evaluation that they were continuing to build and grow, which is why I chose this case study, but not at a massive national scale because that wasn't an intent. That could be really good if these things could be further, and you mentioned some good places where they could strengthen. And as has come up in a few different discussions today over a few different groups, some of the issues we've talked about, influencing decision makers to be interested in this, doing it at scale, being able to get through a number of issues and changes. It's basically about transformation from, in the longer term, from a discriminatory set of systems and practices to something that's more inclusive. This is not quick stuff. And I'd be kidding you if I said that. There is some low-hanging fruit that can move you in that, help you to work with governments to move in that direction. But real lasting transformational change is going to take place in a number of stages and with a lot of trial and error. And I was mentioning a CDG project in the Philippines that's moving into disaster risk management quite heavily. They've got a really good chance of moving forward because they've had over 15 years of experience of building up that program and working with government and building relationships between government and communities, having some really bad, have things go wrong and then figure out how to make it go right. So yeah, it's long-term stuff, and when you're looking at your next project, sometimes a program, you have to look at what you can realistically achieve to move the agenda forward. And if you can achieve a few things that move the agenda forward and create space for further follow-up, then you've achieved something. So just leave that thought. There's a quick video I'll show you, and we'll take a short coffee break. And we'll look at some of these tools that I keep mentioning as entry points. This is just a little video that was made about one of the people involved in this program. Put my glasses on.
আমাদের গ্রামে বন্যা হয়েছিল, ক্ষয়ক্ষতি হয়েছে, পশু পাখি মরে গেছে ডুবে, আমাদের গ্রামে ঘর ডুবে গেছে। কিন্তু আমরা এখানে বয়স্ক প্রতিবন্ধী অথবা বিধবাকে ত্রাণ বিতরণ করতেছি, কিন্তু আমরা নিতেছি না। আমরা তাদেরকে সহযোগিতা করে আমরা তাদেরকে বিতরণ এগুলো করতেছি। যেমন ওয়াদালি ভাই মাল বিতরণ করলো, নামে দিল, ফিরোজ ভাই লিস্টি করলো। এখানে সবাই আমার মতো প্রতিবন্ধী, দৃষ্টি প্রতিবন্ধী, শারীরিক প্রতিবন্ধী।
Tell you what, go grab a cup of tea, and I'll see if I can find it. We can look at it when you come back. If we could do a quick 10 minutes, be back at 3.
I knew. I was like, oh, she's going to be pitching this like immediately. I knew you were thinking that. Oh, no.
Yeah, I'm just trying to send an email. I have to send by the end of today. But during the training? Thank you. Like yours too.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm enjoying it. It's really nice. This is organized by GFDR.
Margaret. Chris.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cynthia?
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Strange IT experience. I've never had this happen in any of the bank rooms that I've done. Where it doesn't take. No, it's just the way it stops and starts and doesn't take the full screen and skips around. So.
Oh, it's. I think I know.
But I've got it where I want it right now. So.
But you want to maximize it though?
Yeah, it's saying your browser doesn't support it for that.
So,
yeah.
And we're having trouble getting out of it.
Cindy?
Yeah.
Hi, nice to meet you. I'm Hiro.
Hi.
I'm from Social Protection Unit.
Social protection?
Yeah,
Oh,
which
okay.
unit are you?
I work in GFDRR.
GFDRR.
Yes.
So like, with
So like,
Akiko?
she asked us why. Akiko? Yeah.
Ah.
She's,
From Japan.
Yeah.
Because I think she was here before me, but in the same program. I came here as like a donor funded from Japan.
Oh, you're also JPO?
JPO.
Oh, me too.
Ah, really?
From Norway.
Oh,
Yes.
Norway.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Oh. What kind of disaster is like main topic for you?
Sorry?
What kind of disaster? What is your background? Especially related to some disaster?
I don't know my background?
Background, main major.
I haven't really worked. DRM is actually new.
Oh, really?
Like, I've only been working with that for a year. I used to work in
Ah, okay. So it's like related to like this, like.
So I worked mostly actually on climate change adaptation.
Okay.
And mitigation actually, but also gender and social.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So DRM is the new gender.
Yeah, because like for me, like I mainly work for disaster risk management, especially for earthquake, because tsunami and earthquake disaster very occurs a lot in Japan. So climate change is very new for me, and even for like social protection is new for me. But because social protection team like need to think how to cope with disaster and climate change, because as we discussed, like social security net is also one very important action after the disaster. But the social protection team think about because the beneficiary of social protection is very limited. Need to widen or need to be more flexible for the targeting after the disaster. Yeah. I find because so many people from like disaster risk management or GFDRR doesn't know so much what social protection team is actually doing, right? Even I didn't know so much, so I'm now trying to exploring more.
I think maybe we haven't done that much, but I think that there are some.
Yeah, there are some.
There are several social protection.
Yeah.
This is what I think.
There is a grant for GFDRR. It's for we are now making the social protection connecting to DRM toolkit for the SP social protection TTL to how to understand disaster or what kind of information is necessary, what kind of tool can be utilized for the mitigation of disaster and preparedness. Yeah.
How long have you been?
I just come here from the beginning of this month.
Oh, so you're
Quite new, and for me, like very difficult to understand. Like because she said like very interesting thing is that she said like it's very difficult to scale up this to national level because so many units will be involved or so many sectors will be included. But because like for doing the PDNA, I think many units already involved in there for making the PDNA. I thought. I don't know who will make the PDNA.
Who makes the PDNA?
Yeah, because I think from the many units join to make the PDNA after disaster. Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know why it's very difficult to do those kind of multi-unit approach to one project or for the if we consider about the reconstruction, this is very difficult to consider the involvement of social inclusion in the phase of recovery. I think he said. I think she said no.
Yeah, I see how
she said it's very difficult in the recovery phase to include the disability or those kind of things.
Like the immediate relief.
Yeah. The immediate relief it can be included.
Yeah, I'm not sure if do you think are you talking about what's the woman sitting Yeah. I mean, I think that in every.
So I also asked him by saying
when a disaster or crisis happen, I always think that
there's no point of integrating.
You know, include all of those aspects.
Yeah.
It takes different parts.
It's quite difficult.
But at same time, we have examples that it has happened as well.
Yeah.
So, and also like if you and I was also like, okay, so then like I already actually use why are like certain groups after make the changes after when you actually start. So it's probably more challenging, but I would say less about
Sorry,
a shift in mindset about like acknowledging the necessity of actually doing this from the beginning. So you want like exclude groups to benefit from projects and development after.
Yeah.
So by saying.
Because for me, like, no experience of the project yet, so I don't know how difficult. I can imagine, but I actually don't know how it will be so difficult, or how can project be more flexible to those kind of issues.
You should also have like thematic or like gender.
I mean, if you ask,
Sorry?
Where were you before?
I work in like a consulting firm, mainly working for JICA, and also I worked before World Bank, Tokyo, the GFDRR Tokyo Hub project about the knowledge report, but mainly for JICA project I work. Yeah, before like just I'm only here for 1 month around. Yeah.
And then you're going grant.
No. Before 1 month ago, like 1 month ago, I come to here, and as a JPO program, I'll be here at least for 2 years as a donor funded. Yeah. Of social protection. Can I ask you which unit are you in?
South Asia.
GSURR of South Asia. So same with Keiko, right? Okay. You guys know in South Asia? I don't. Okay. Yeah, I heard about that.
I also joined the bank as a.
Okay, when was that around?
About half
a year ago. So 6 months ago, so you are still in JPU, you mean?
Yeah, a lot of
I didn't know that. Yeah.
I know, like, the Japanese government,
There are also in GSURR, and I think GSURR and GFDRR, some JPO. Akiko Toya, yeah.
Who else is there?
One person is in poverty team. I think this year only 4 people, and one is not yet come. One is Toya Akiko, one is me, and the other one is in poverty. So, I think it's up to here. Sometimes we think about, I think 4 is kind of.
My name is Kajol Rekha, and I'm 23 years old. In 2003, I had an accident. I fell off a chair and one of my vertebrae slipped and severed my spinal cord. Now I am paralyzed. Before the accident, my life was good. I was living with my parents and going to school. And then they both suddenly died. My brothers looked after me and arranged my marriage. However, after my accident, my husband left me and remarried. It was difficult and painful. I suffered a lot. Previously, I was treated with affection by everyone in my family. But that all changed. I was neglected and I became a burden to everyone. Life became much better for me once I was given my wheelchair. I used to be totally dependent on others, but now I can get out and move around. I received income generation training from a local development agency in growing vegetables and rearing chickens and ducks, then purchased a hand sewing machine and now draw an income by tailoring garments for people in my village. My house was modified to meet my basic needs, such as sanitation, making safe drinking water, and my lavatory accessible. It was also raised to reduce the impact of the floods. When it comes to floods and other disasters, people with disabilities are particularly vulnerable. There is generally widespread panic, and in many cases, a person with a disability is forgotten and left behind. So now I am part of a disaster preparedness committee, and we've made a list of all people with a disability in our area, and we can take immediate steps to locate and evacuate them. I am also responsible for educating people about hygiene and general health for when the waters hit, such as how to protect their food against insects and contamination. Previously, I was afraid of the prospect of flooding, but now that we are prepared, I know what to do and I can face it. Now I am no longer a burden to my family, and I am proud that I am a valuable and contributing member of my community.
That's the story of an individual from that project they recorded. Okay. What we shall do now. Just do a little bit of chalk and talk stuff. Just to run through with you some of the possible entry points and opportunities that have been identified for improving social inclusion. And we'll then get you to a few examples, and we'll get you to try to apply it to a scenario to see if you could, in a typical sort of World Bank style project, be able to apply some of this. That's what we're trying to get at. That's the goal. If we're trying to be inclusive, what does it look like? Full and meaningful participation of all groups. Promoting the equality of rights and opportunities. Responding to diversity and promoting it, and trying to transform some of the power relations to improve longer-term resilience. In terms of some of the entry points that have been used, basically, in trying to promote social inclusion in World Bank operations, I've borrowed this same diagram from the gender strategy. Some of you who are coming tomorrow in the theater, you might recognize it. But there's basically three elements we're looking at, no matter what you decide. Whether it's GFDRR dialoguing with a government about a proposal to get a grant, to do some risk assessment, do some planning, or whether it's a bank DRM person working on a major project with a bit of infrastructure and a bit of education and capacity building and so on. And it's basically looking at it in three parts, making certain, and this is all just confirming what we've been talking about all through the morning and the early afternoon, that there needs to be, whatever we're looking at doing, it needs to be underpinned by a good analysis. If we do not understand the context, if we do not understand the composition of the communities and the society that we're working in, we are failing to understand risk in all of its dimensions. We're missing something important. So the whole idea is to get some good analysis happening and to find out just what are the differences, what are the gaps between the dominant groups and those who are excluded or marginalized. So we need to tackle that information. Once we know what the issues are, then we have a lot more ability to decide what kind of interventions would be appropriate. And hopefully we will be doing that in consultation with people, representatives from those groups that we're trying to reach as a part of our program. And then, of course, the obvious thing that we need to be able to assess our progress and our results. So those are the three key areas that are identified in gender specifically. And it's the basis of the new gender reporting tags also, and indicators for the bank in gender. The principles are the same. Social gender is one of the same things, same set. So what are the places we want to get this in? A good social analysis. And I would add /gender. Because any good social analysis should also incorporate good gender analysis. And this is for the front end programming, so not disaster response. We have a look here. What are some of the kinds of things we want to find out? Differences between social groups in their skills and capacity, their access to resources, their ability to participate in decision making. Are they respected? How are they paid attention to in society? What inequalities, when we've gathered all this information, exist? What are the barriers to social inclusion for those people? And what's causing them? What are the barriers and what are the causes? Once we know that, we're armed with the information to tell us, to guide us on how the gaps or the inequalities we found could be addressed through our programming. Sometimes it's something complicated and long-term. Sometimes it's something that's more easy to do in the short term. Depends what you find. And a good social analysis or gender analysis should also be making some recommendations and having a look at, okay, this is the kind of program we want to do. In disaster risk management, we want to set up a really good flood control system. We want to have an early warning system. We want to have communications. This is how we see we'd like to do it. What's the impact, the potential impact of that program and the way we're thinking of going about it on people from socially excluded groups? Do we know if we are going to be supporting them to move ahead or inadvertently exacerbating discrimination against them through our process or causing them harm? In the case of disaster risk management, of course, the bottom line is we're looking at assessing risk. We're trying to identify the nature of the risk that people are dealing with. And we talked about this morning already, their vulnerability to hazards, their capacity and their resources to manage those issues themselves. Like the woman in the video, she became empowered to actually deal with disaster risk management herself, to know what to do in an evacuation and to know how to help others. And then looking at which actions can eliminate or reduce that risk. So it's really, you can do this actually as a subset of any social analysis in a developmental program. I've been quite surprised actually when I've looked at a lot of bank social and environmental analyses and various other poverty and social analyses and not seen this stuff in there. So I would think it would be automatic. And if you can get it in there, you're getting a lot of quality information to help you to guide the programming that you're doing. There are many methodologies for doing social analysis, and there are a number that are used for developmental purposes by the World Bank Group that could just as easily be applied and adapted to a hazard and vulnerability analysis, or it could be done as a subset of a broader poverty analysis. This should not be hard to do at all and would not change the cost of the exercise. So that's why I'm surprised it isn't done more often to get this in and get this information flowing. We're going to look, I won't go through some of the broader social analysis methods, but we'll look at just a little bit at how social analysis can be integrated into your disaster and climate risk assessment processes. So on the one hand, you can get this into a broader social and gender analysis process. Then there's how do we get it into the risk assessments that you're doing actually yourselves in DRM for the clients and partners. To give an example, this is a very interesting, there's a website and a whole set of tools and a whole framework for inclusive disaster risk management that's been developed by multiple agencies with funding from the European Union. It was developed to be used in South Asia, but it's actually become global. What they developed was applicable in India. It's just you see pictures of people in saris rather than in a kilt. But the same stuff coming out. I recommend strongly, this will be in your resources, taking a look at this. And what they do is, this framework that's been developed, this group they call themselves, developed this thing they call an inclusive DRM framework. I'm just showing you one example. There are others. There are numerous models of how to do risk assessment. This is just one of them, on how to bring in the social dimensions. And they looked at 4 key areas in this particular methodology that they think are critical to doing a good analysis of social inclusion issues and considerations when you're collecting information and working on a design of a disaster risk management program. Questions around recognition of diversity in the country or the place that you want to do that DRM program. What's the situation there already? Do they have policies and legislation and practices that promote greater diversity, that promote social inclusion, or not? That will tell you a little bit about the enabling environment or not that you're working in terms of government and broader community and those in positions of power. Do they recognize and value diversity? Participation in decision making, that's looking at, maybe fairly obvious, it's looking at, once we have some idea of which groups tend to be excluded and marginalized, typically, where do they fit in the decision making train for disaster risk management from the local to the national level? Are they represented there? Do they have voice there or not? If they do, what kind of voice, how much voice, who represents them, who speaks, and this again tells you a little bit about whether this is going to happen with the government that you're working with. If these people are not participating in decision making, if their level of participation is low, it's probably likely that you're not seeing a very high level of awareness in the government or the leadership that you're working with of diversity or understanding of it, and these people are not being reached. So it's to find out whether disaster risk management systems, including early warning systems, preparedness systems, anything, whether it's actually involving people in the decision-making process and whether they have any say or input. If we know this information, it's the process of looking, okay, if we know that the degree to which if we found out which groups are more excluded, which groups we do not see represented in decision-making, which groups we do not see represented in programming, policy, etc., what are the nature of the barriers that these people are facing, and how can we remove them? What are the ways we can help to support that process? What they do is they have a series of questions, key questions, and there's multiple checklists that they have for different areas like early warning systems, community-based disaster risk management, with numerous areas. We have a lot of checklists and tools to help you know which questions should be asked. So if you asked a social development specialist to help you out with an analysis for in a risk analysis, in a disaster risk analysis, you can take some of these tools and give them to them and say, these are the kinds of questions we'd like to help us answer, help us with design. And then, of course, at the end of that, you may have to have some tailored approaches because to treat everybody equally, you sometimes have to do things So that's a way to find out, do we need to change the way we do things to make sure that these people can do it. And in your folder again, you want to see an example. There is a page that's called Inclusive DRM Framework, Social Analysis Key Questions. I have extracted this from this Inclusive DRM Framework. This is the most simple, basic version of the sort of questions you can ask. You can unpack this, and they do, in the toolkits, and go much deeper and wider into the kinds of considerations that we look at under each of their 4 categories. So that's just a write-up of the kinds of questions that we should be asking when we're doing risk assessments and developing risk profiles and looking at the foundation of strategic planning for disaster risk management or program planning. These are the sorts of questions that we need to look at. So that's just...
I'm just wondering, are you giving this kind of training to the social people as well? Because when I talk to the social specialists in the bank, they're mainly into social safeguards, and they only talk about resettlement plans and Indigenous people. If you ask them about DRM, they're like, or, this kind of inclusive stuff.
Or a lot of other things.
Yes, they don't know how to respond, because I asked them on several projects in India, it's like, how they're like dealing with Indigenous people that are resettlement plans. But there's no resettlement plan.
That is about to change. A few of you might be aware of this, or I'm told it's about to change. You may be aware that the bank just approved new social and environmental safeguards this year. I think it was this year. It was late last year. And they come into effect in 2018. And if they are followed appropriately, they substantially lift the bar on this. And there's a huge impetus, actually, to do this inside the bank. Some of the impetus come from all sorts of reasons. Maria Beatriz was telling me that one impetus for this was a dreadful incident that happened with a project in Uganda with gender-based violence, and the tremendous repercussions for the bank of not having been aware of these social inclusion type issues, and getting caught completely on the back foot with a very harmful program. This and many other factors have, I think, contributed to this impetus.
I just want to add to that. I mean, a few of us in the group are social. And there's other people in the room. But just to say also that, so GFDRR program that I lead with GFDRR, as some of you may know, that is a partnership between social and GFDRR, where we can provide technical advice and financial resources. So if any of you have a project and you want to integrate this, talk to me or talk to us. And we're also, particularly we're prioritizing gender right now, but we'll also do social inclusion of identifying and mentoring, nurturing social development specialists that can be part of these teams to help you integrate that. Because we actually, with the gender, we have 2 days, one for narrative people and one for social people. So we're developing the social people who might not know the narrative people, right? So we're trying to target both. So it's going to take some time, but we're...
Because these social people already sit on these teams because it's a requirement. We have social environment, but they haven't been proactively taking on this role, and it's been on the specialists to actually really design it to make sure it's socially inclusive. And so I think it'll be very helpful if the social specialists can also have that skill.
Hopefully, as Margaret said, we will see that. Training for them, a policy framework that has been beefed up, and also the reason I'm showing you some tools of other organizations, a few samples, is because the bank doesn't yet have specific tools in this area of the link between DRM and social inclusion. inclusion. There are broader tools, but not in this area. So that's also a work in progress that Margaret and her team have been looking at, and that will take a bit of time to develop guidance also, not only for social development specialists, but for DRM specialists on the reverse side. So hopefully in a year's time, instead of looking at this framework, which is quite fine, but it's nice to have one that's tailored to your own precise situation. This is just a glimpse to you of how this particular framework for inclusiveness, they came up with this rather wild-looking design. I just like printing it out because it looks so pretty. But they basically, what this complicated picture is basically saying is that we want to have good social inclusiveness. It has to happen at every level, national, regional, local, in terms of the linkages within a disaster risk management system. There has to be awareness and acceptance built at different levels. That there have to be policies, plans, laws that recognize diversity and aim for social inclusion and identify their goals in terms of what they're going to try to achieve for social inclusion in their own context, in their own country. And to do all of that, you have to build up awareness, knowledge, change attitudes, build the skills of people, train them, get your evidence together, make the business case, and start that dialogue. And so that's basically what that diagram is trying to say to you. That it has to be tackled at all levels, across every area that you're working on. Of course, the deliverables and serviceability of policy and programming, you can't kind of escape both. Again, if you're trying to change discriminatory practices, some of those changes have to happen at a systems level. So that's their complicated diagram. But they really, their toolkit, I do recommend having a look at the toolkit and the framework. It's good stuff you can pull. As I just mentioned, the types of social analysis you do in DRM is just the same as in anything else. It needs to happen at all three levels, and tools like this framework provide you with guidance on how to look across all levels. And there's another tool that I want to show you that is in your kit as well, and I'll just grab somebody else's. This is just an extract from it, just to give you a flavor. This was developed by CARE International. It's really quite, I think it's really quite good. It's one of the better ones. They engaged a guy named Robert Chambers, who is well known in the disaster field, for being able to help organizations learn how to quantify qualitative information and get greater respect and understanding of the interrelationships between quantitative and qualitative information. You have to have both to design really effective programs. And this guy is highly experienced, so he led the charge on developing this framework. And what's just on the pages here is this one is meant to combine disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptive capacity development. So the front page is just their vision, their framework of how they see that happening and where they see addressing underlying causes of vulnerability. This one is the summary table, so it's pretty, you can go into a lot more detail in this, but it's just to give you the general idea of the areas of vulnerability analysis that CARE is undertaking. This framework's actually become very popular and is being used by many organizations now. But they have very detailed guidance that drills down very deeply into each level of the linkages, vertically and horizontally, between vulnerability due to social exclusion and how it links to your planning and your programming in disasters and disasters management and climate change. And so I've just shared with you their broad lead-in guiding questions at the national, local, and community household levels. Very simple, but it's a start point. It's an entry point to know what kind of questions should we even be asking about our programs and where they're going. So I'll leave that with you as something that you can at your leisure. Entry points if you are World Bank. At the country level, there are a number. The one that I think is the least used with the most potential benefit longer term at the highest strategic level is the country diagnostics. That where you can include a look at both disaster risk management issues in a country and social inclusion issues linked to that. This can lead to some really healthy dialogues with governments, which pave the way a bit for some improvements. And whatever a government is willing to agree to and is comfortable with can end up in the country partnership framework. And if you have that, you have something that's going to have a performance indicator against it for the duration of that particular framework. And I'm going to show you one after that did that has done that. And then flowing on from that, performance and learning reviews and completion and learning reviews. Gathering the lessons learned. If we've done a social analysis and gender analysis to know what was the baseline situation we're walking into with that DRM initiative we're planning. If we know the baseline situation, then we've got good information from which to start planning, reasonable, realistic initiatives, and then we need to have performance indicators. That's at that level. This is kind of a work in progress, this slide, because I think there's a lot more dialogue needed about this and about where the best ways to fit in the socially sensitive disaster risk management analysis. And so for now, I've just put in a couple of the obvious sort of points: environmental and social impact assessments. We can also come into a fragility analysis, because there's a lot of countries that have both lots of disaster risk and lots of poverty and social impact assessment. To me, that's a really obvious one. And in the case of GFDRR, that works with the bank, but is usually dealing with proposals that are more focused on technical assistance and influencing and that sort of thing. I'd say it's the consultation stage, and when you're looking at a proposal being developed, and when that discussion begins with whoever the potential partner is going to be, these issues need to be raised and their importance emphasized, so that also with the partner and the client, that there is a discussion and a consideration of what information do you need about social inclusion, how are you going to get it, and what does that mean for the work that's going to be carried out in the program. Some of the very influential work that I've seen that GFDR has supported in doing preliminary risk assessments at the country level, which have helped lead to major investment programs with the World Bank. So making that connection. This is a really obvious, important place to be getting this in, to be getting a good social and gender analysis. How can we have a risk assessment that doesn't know these things? And that is your start point also for negotiation and dialogue of a bigger program that may follow on that initial investment. But this to me is the most important, when I look at it, one of the most important entry points for GFDRR to get skilled up in this. Yeah, that's all I've got for now. And
I just say on these different entry points, just so you're aware, I mean, with just compiling resources, we've got resources and guidebooks up in PDA. If you are working on a DPO, there's a whole guidebook around climate change up with DPOs for the poverty and social analysis, impact analysis. If you're working with CDD operation, there's a brick, we need to make it user friendly, but there's a lot of guidance around integrating this into that. So I would encourage you to ask GFDRR for using their funds to do the social inclusion analysis for DRM operations. That's something that we can do.
How much is the average cost of this assessment? Like you'd be asking
I think it depends on the context. I mean, in the PDNA side, we have the social impact analysis, which is that's like about anywhere between $30,000 and $40,000. I mean, it's not huge amounts of funds. It depends on the context and what specifically you want to do. There's, the climate, what's called the climate resilience quick response.
Oh, the just in time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The just in time, that's up to 50K
50,000
for GFDR.
Yes.
And that's so you can look at, for example, the gender to that. I think you're looking
on.
There are resources.
Yeah.
There's guidance and pots of money out there because this is not expensive to get a hold of the information that will help you make informed decisions about social inclusion. I think also for some areas, once they try it out and have this information, some of the cynicism and uncertainty about it will dissipate pretty quickly when they see the information coming out about how kind of basic common sense stuff that you can put into programming with that information. It's not rocket science, a lot of it, to get things moving, but it's getting the expertise in to help you and getting the information that you need to make those decisions.
So did you have a list of go-to consultants that you go to for that analysis, or?
I'm actually an outsider. I'm not from the bank.
When I say you, I'm talking about general.
So, like I said before, we're trying to identify bank social practitioners that can do it, but also consultants as well. For right now, it's a little informal. We just drop me or Christina or Fatima an email or something. But we're trying to develop a bigger database with profiles.
Here's just a bit about these new safeguards that came up earlier. It's like broadened social assessment and management of environmental and social risks. It's meant to help ensure social inclusion and non-discrimination. That is a specific point that is in this new guidance. Requires stakeholder engagement throughout the project cycle. So not just the beginning and the end. Community health and safety measures, and there's specific guidance on emergency response and disaster mitigation. And it's meant to provide greater clarity of World Bank and borrower responsibilities in terms of this area and in terms of these subjects. And it's meant to be augmented by a new directive that explicitly requires staff to assist the borrower to consider, mitigate, and manage social and environmental issues, not just resettlement. So this is quite potentially, if it's well implemented, a game changer. So if you're GFDRR and working with someone from the bank, they may be starting to ask you a lot more about what can you do for me in this area, in the work that you're doing, and you could be supporting them in that work by being on the front foot. So this is really important, coming in next year, and they'll be rolling out training. And you can find this on your intranet, this document. I encourage you to take a look because it's going to have big implications for the work that needs to be moving. Just a quick mention that one of the problems we constantly have, both in disaster risk reduction and in post-disaster recovery planning, is a lack of gender disaggregated data. So we don't even know how many men and women were affected. It's just numbers in an area. We're missing a lot of information about gender, age, and other characteristics. There have been initiatives taken to help governments to strengthen their ability to collect this data that can be used in a disaster context. A quick example, I worked at the bank a few years ago on a couple of social protection systems and social welfare systems that had registries of the country's most vulnerable people and the circumstances of vulnerability and the funding and support they were eligible for. We made linkages with the people who work in the emergency services to work with those databases together in times of emergency and for programming in rapid response to vulnerable groups. And that work is actually building momentum and starting to reach a takeoff point. Heroes doing some documentation on that stuff, or on a version of it. This is the stuff that Margaret mentioned. This is the gigantic manual but it's done in modules, so it looks really scary, 400 pages, but you can extract the module you need to deal with specific subtopics. And that was done for social funds and community-driven development operations, but there's a lot of information in there about social inclusion and specific issues faced by subgroups, particular challenges they face. So that one's quite useful for getting some information out about what you can do. And this, in terms of climate change, there's this excellent operational toolkit, and that toolkit, at the end of it, has a number of resources identified as well within it for gender and social analysis, and for various work on hazards and vulnerability and so on. So this one's really good, and it's nice and short and sweet. Very user-friendly. Just to give you an idea that there are a lot of resources in every area except SOGI out there. This is not a vacuum. While the bank doesn't have it yet, it can easily draw from some excellent pieces of work. You could use this stuff right now, some of these toolkits and guidance notes to help plan some of your work, and then eventually, hopefully, you'll have your own types of guidance notes and policy notes and briefing notes, etc., as you do here. But for now, there's heaps of these. These are just a few examples that give you lots of guidance, both on programming, not only on gender analysis and social analysis, but programming. And there'll be a range of those available to you in your resource kitty that we'll be putting together. As I said, the areas, though, where there's less, this is one of the few documents I found. I've just taken an extract from it, and it's in terms of LGBT, but it's very European country oriented. So that a lot of work to be done there. And in the case of Indigenous people, a lot of the best guidance is actually coming out of environmental management programming in terms of how to engage Indigenous people in resource protection and that sort of thing. So that's an idea of some of the tools that are out there that can help you with analysis. For post-disaster assessments and recovery frameworks, for those of you unfamiliar with this, they were mentioned this morning. After usually a major disaster, the World Bank is heavily involved, along with the UN and some other agencies, the European Union, in going in to do a post-disaster assessment. I won't go into detail about that here. And more recently, recovery frameworks have been introduced as well, and the first few of these have been produced. It's very important at that stage to also get this in. There's quite a lot of debate about how one does that and what's appropriate and effective. But I have participated, not in more recent years, but in the past I've participated on several of these exercises to do exactly that, to get that kind of information into the assessment. And it is entirely possible to do that, a mix of quantitative and qualitative information. The PDA manual provides some guidance on it that's more directed at the role of UN agencies in these assessments, but quite honestly, the bank and many governments don't want an all singing, all dancing 25 agency assessments. So the bank often gets asked, GFDRR, with the involvement of the bank, gets asked a lot to do smaller rapid assessments that aren't so hard to manage for a client government. And you can also fit it into there. People in the World Bank developed this methodology, social impact assessment, and was designed to fit inside the broader post-disaster needs assessments. It gives you a very interesting look at what are the types of information that can be collected, how they can be collected, and what it would cost you to collect them, which is not exorbitant, actually, to get enough information to get you over the line for decision making. I won't go into the detail of how it works, but those are the 4 areas it works in. And there are some interesting examples from earlier of some of these. In terms of some actions, been found that quite often for social inclusion, a twin-tracked approach of empowerment and mainstreaming is an effective way to both build up social equality and the ability of people to participate on terms. And a lot of this entails dialoguing and supporting getting social inclusion into disaster risk management and climate change policies, legislation, and systems. Wherever you're working in that area, it's getting it in there. Dialoguing with governments, and there's lots of examples of where it's already been done. Getting social and gender training to partners and counterparts to raise their awareness of the issues and the staff, and ensuring that communications and outreach, IEC for the DRM people, can be accessed for some of the easier entry points. You've already covered this. Partnerships are really important, and getting that in-country local knowledge. Putting quotas or targets in place in decision-making bodies for projects and for DRM itself can be very helpful, provided people are supported. And educating some groups on their rights and entitlements. M&E, getting it into the performance monitoring framework like anything else, having a methodology and putting in a budget to collect the information. Sometimes you get performance indicators for social inclusion without a corresponding budget to collect the data that's needed to monitor and just a quick example of another toolkit. The European Commission has developed a gender and age marker for all its humanitarian work and a toolkit about how to use it for design and planning and assessing results. So that's an interesting evaluation. Thematic areas. This is just a quick list of some of the types of areas of risk reduction and climate change adaptation and response and recovery that can really help to make a difference. You can read more about this. I'm not going to go through it, but you can read about it. There's more tools and resources available where you can get some quite detailed information. That's one that was done a couple of years ago, which consists of 6 or 7 guidance notes on every possible facet of social protection you can think of that's linked to disaster and climate change.
Can I add to that? We're doing a follow-up on that toolkit right now. Yasa there and I are working on the follow-up where we have a toolkit on how to integrate DRM into social protection. That's being worked on now.
So that's out there. And a lot of the information in there can be used more broadly. This is just an example, again, from externally of some of the very specific things you can get. And by thematic area and sector, information is available. And again, that will be in your resource kit. But this is a particularly well done one on modern approaches to early warning systems and accessible broadcasting for groups that might be left behind. So a lot of stuff that's in there. Another example of the sorts of things that can be done. This came out in 2008 for the broader developmental agenda of the bank. And this is one that was produced by the Australian Government Aid Program in terms of how to make design of buildings and infrastructure accessible to all people. So that you don't have to retrofit. So as most of you have worked in this area know, retrofitting is really expensive. If you get it in on the ground floor, it's estimated only 2% roughly to the cost of infrastructure development to make it accessible to people. And that is, and it's not, its origins are in disability, accessibility for disability, but it was found as work in this area progressed that you can design accessible structures that are for everybody, for elderly people who have mobility issues, for pregnant women and moms with prams, and in the case of some of our emergency shelters in that LGBTI designing the bathrooms in a way that's safe for everybody, that kind of thing. That's just a diagram that somebody came up with once about the approach to universal design. So it's something I think that could be incorporated into a lot of the DRM physical infrastructure work. I won't go through that so much. The answer 1% of it was 2%. But yeah, we had an experience in an organization I was working in with a great system of evacuation that was built using stairways. So it was inaccessible to just about everybody. So they had to go back to the drawing board. Schools are an obvious place to do it. And we've got to link together the user groups with those who are designing the infrastructure to be able to use requirements. And in Sri Lanka, this actually ended up becoming national law after their tsunami experience. So in their case, it means building back better, building back resistance. And if you are looking post-disaster, disaster can provide a real opportunity for changing things, not just physical buildings, but also creating opportunities to improve, to start to address some discrimination issues. That's just a copy of that book again. It's infrastructure oriented, and those are the sectors we encompass, including post-conflict and natural disasters. So it might be of interest to some of you. Here's a few examples. People with disabilities and disaster management in Indonesia. Project of the Australian government. Nationwide mapping of organizations engaged in disaster risk reduction to identify what were the barriers that they had to working with people with disabilities. And that was looking at everything from physical to attitudinal. They ran capacity building workshops with both types of groups and brought them together on how to contribute to policy and planning. They developed a tool and field tested it for doing this, for drawing in groups and bringing them together, and for working with, particularly with the disability-focused groups to up their knowledge of disaster risk management and their ability to engage on an equal basis with the disaster risk management organizations in the government. University of Sydney ran it. These are the government partners who supported it. And that was the product of dialogue and discussion to be able to do that. And these are the barriers they found that the DRM groups lacked: experience, expertise, technical skills, dealing with social attitudes, accessibility, etc. And that there was a lack of not enough data on disability. And the government, though, was supportive, which helped, and had a broader policy on disability that was a basis for the negotiation to extend this into disaster. And there was a broad awareness by the DRR actors and a broad general willingness to engage. And that was enough to open the door. But where they'll go with it, it remains to be seen. Not to see in a few years. That's just a quick description in detail of how they did it. I think I'll just skip through that. Typical to me sort of process of training and support, capacity building at the local level. Then they did surveys, and they developed a relative resilience index, which is based on something called the Washington Group on Disability Statistics Methodology, which is a broader methodology for looking at disability. And they came up with some recommendations in the end. And their most important one was that 78% of people with disabilities have not been involved in disaster risk reduction activities in the areas that they covered. St. Lucia, quick one, to show you how you can use small pots of money to create some good impacts. So this is a disaster vulnerability reduction project. This is the full project in its components. one of interest to us here is a climate adaptation financing facility with $5 million. And what happened was its purpose was to provide affordable loans to help people to reduce their vulnerability and to adapt to hydrometeorological events. St. Lucia Development Bank was the main partner to be involved in implementation. And it was recognized that gender in this case was a critical issue. And TA was provided, which was not hugely expensive to do surveys, household surveys to break down data about gender and disaster vulnerability and access to credit. The money in this case came from the Umbrella Facility for Gender Equality, and this was administered through the Central Statistical Office of St. Lucia. And so what they're doing as a result of collecting this information and doing analysis, what they're attempting to do in this project is to develop a gender-informed and gender-sensitive strategy for getting climate resilience loans to women as well as men. These are some of the indicators. Someone asked earlier about what kind of indicators end up being used. This is what they decided were going to be the indicators for this project that we're going to measure themselves on. See what happens. Mexico, working with Indigenous people, a biodiversity project. It's an older project of the bank that was evaluated, working with traditional groups. It involved capacity building. It's those kind of sub-projects that the bank does where you fund a series of sub-projects through a pool of money. Monitoring and evaluation and coordination and all these other things. It was, they claim, the first time that the World Bank had involved communities in biodiversity conservation at that level. And so there was a lot of attention to tenure issues and community sensitivity to tenure issues. And a great deal of formal and informal recognition of the needs and rights of Indigenous people. And that was done through a lot of consultation and research as well. Participatory social assessment was done in this case to get that information, and to find out people's level of interest and what they were willing to engage in. They also established institutional arrangements at the state level to support communities. So they actually created an arm of the relevant government body that dealt specifically with this issue of participation of these communities in conservation planning and land use. And one of the findings of their evaluation is that the governments continued to support the model and was giving budget to it to continue its implementation when they went in and did this IDG evaluation 3 years later. That's just a list of their successes of what were some of the results they achieved in terms of activities and community engagement and monitoring biodiversity threats. The downside was they didn't get quite as much buy-in from everywhere in the communities that they had hoped, and they hadn't reached cost recovery at the time of the evaluation of some of the businesses, micro businesses they supported, and small businesses to build resilience. Their finding was this takes time to build up these kind of inclusive systems and responsive systems, decentralized and demand-driven. You have to build trust, reach common understanding, and work on conflicts that can arise out of that. So this is not quick fixes. And they had a lot of problems with their monitoring and evaluation systems because they, on that particular facet of the project, they basically failed to link they decided to go with a sophisticated monitoring system that the communities could manage. And so it kind of fell apart. Pakistan, a project that Charlotte was involved in, which was a post-disaster one, earthquake disability project. And I think rather than run through all the slides, maybe Charlotte, you could just quickly tell us a bit about that project.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, so we all know about the earthquake, and I think what was really important about this project was that there was funding that was made available specific to the issue of disability inclusion. And that was funding that came from the Japanese government. And so what was happening at the time was that you had all the big donors and all the big funding going into kind of a central place where all the planning was happening, but they were not thinking about disability. And then you had organizations like UNICEF that were thinking about children. And you know, if you went to UNICEF, they'd say, well, yeah, it's really important, but we're still just kind of figuring out what to do with children. And so it became apparent that we needed to think about the disability piece kind of on its own. I was saying earlier on at the table that what was really interesting in this project that we found that a disproportionate number of people who became disabled as a result of the earthquake were women. And it was the time of the day that the earthquake happened, the fact that many women were home, they were preparing meals, and so when buildings caved in or structures caved in, many of them sustained spinal cord injuries, which was the vast number of disabilities that resulted during the earthquake. So, what was really an important lesson learned in that in the Pakistan experience was that you could not have any preconceived ideas of what was going to work, any preconceived ideas of what should work. There was a great rush to get wheelchairs, right? Because you had hundreds of thousands of people who had been disabled and potentially needed wheelchairs. But when you looked at the terrain from where people came, it just didn't lend itself to any kind of wheelchair use. And so what I learned from that was, it was important to talk to the community. Talk to the community because in many instances they came up with suggestions about how it would be best for them to get around. So it wasn't a wheelchair that they were asking for. They were saying, if you give us a donkey that has a cart, we can actually move in this mountainous area. So we ended up with a whole lot of wheelchairs in storage and had to look at different ways to get people to be mobile. I think the other important message there was just the absolute essential need to involve the community. Because it didn't matter how many resources we poured into one individual, if that community wasn't thinking about inclusion, then it was going to be very difficult. And so we focused a lot on community-based rehabilitation. We worked through groups. We trained community members, and we really had a community approach to inclusion. The other issue that was important in relation to this project was trying to find the right partners in Pakistan after the earthquake. Because at that stage, everybody's flying. I mean, goodwill intended, but everybody's coming in. And it's almost crowding out the space. And so it was really important to find the right interlocutor. People who really were going to think about the needs of persons with disabilities. And then I think the other important piece for me was that the focus tended to be on people who had become disabled as a result of the earthquake. So the New York Times ran this big story on how many people had become disabled as a result of the earthquake. But nobody was talking about people who were disabled before the earthquake, who were further traumatized as a result of the earthquake. And so, again, back to my earlier point, it's about asking the question why, continuously probing and thinking about why are we in the situation that we are. The project itself was actually pretty efficient. So I mean, it came to an end and had a very good evaluation. So yeah, but there was a lot of working through communities. There was a lot of flexibility on our end in terms of changing things around to meet the needs.
They've won out to evaluation.
So we trained up to 10,000 people in the communities on very basic rehabilitation, so that people were able in the community to provide really basic physiotherapy, right? So we weren't asking for people to become physiotherapists, but really kind of basic exercises. We were looking at putting people in touch with other groups that work on disability. So there was a whole network of activities that we wanted people to reach, right? And we were doing that by training people within the community.
The auspices. So it's mainly Japanese funding. It's just poverty alleviation fund.
No, it wasn't mainly training. I mean, we did provide some assistive devices, right? So some people got wheelchairs. So it wasn't only training.
I believe that there was, it led also to some follow-on work on broader work on disability inclusion and of spin-off beyond disaster recovery, which is one of these kind of opportunities to build back better, in this case, in terms of getting greater government awareness and acceptance of disability issues, which are not well accepted.
Yeah, so it also resulted in as a result of the project, there was a group of young people who became disabled as a result of the earthquake, who then set up an independent living center. So they were working with other disabled people to train people with disabilities on how do you empower yourself, how do you live in the community, what do you need to look out for. So it definitely had, broader consequences for the overall disability agenda.
And that way, again, about time, having to advocate to change attitudes, having to reach a consensus, caused a big delay. It was sort of overly optimistic how much time it would take to get government to come around to this. Advisory councils, one also strategy that was used to create these advisory councils. An MIS to get real-time information. And so an evaluation panel.
What kind of opportunities did you give to contribute economically? What kind of activities? The last bullet point?
Oh yeah, so I mean there were different. Again, it was different types of trainings that we gave to organizations and persons with disabilities. Some of it was really basic. It was like training people on financial literacy. There was a lot of focus on, because you have to recognize many of these people have sustained life-changing injuries. So a lot of the training was just personal hygiene, personal care. So that was very much wrapped up in the rehabilitation piece, if we would like to think about it. But it was more about empowering people about rights. We talked earlier on about confidence and how, as a result of these types of training, we began to see, women who had never gone to school, who were starting to think about going to school. It was fairly rudimentary type of training, but given where it was, it was very, very rural part of the country. It was appropriate.
It's an interesting story from post-disaster. That's it on examples and entry points for a quick spiel on that. Any comments, reactions, thoughts?
Can I just say one thing, that the initial sense was when we came in, was that we could not find organizations that were able to absorb the amount of money that we were bringing into the project, right? So many of the disabled people's organizations just did not have the capacity to take on $5 million. They just couldn't. And so that's why we ended up going with PPAP, the Pakistan Poverty Alleviation Fund, that had the infrastructure and had the capacity to absorb that financing. But what we did was to insist to PPAP that they bring people with disabilities into PPAP to work on the project. Because that way you were both empowering the people at PPAP, but you were also empowering the people with disabilities. And that worked out as a pretty good model.
Is that still going on?
No, the training is. But the independent living center lives in this. There's actually another one set up in Lahore. People own it now. It's a very localized. Right.
These are just a few examples of what is possible. And as you saw, none of them was a perfect all singing, all dancing exercises. Most programs and projects aren't, but they were progressing issues quite a lot. We're trying to, I want the last word on this. Has it given you any kind of ideas of things you could try in your own world? Yes, no, maybe, not sure. Need more.
Can you share the presentations? The PowerPoints?
Yeah.
Yeah.
As I said, we'll be loading some of these resources that have appeared during the day, plus others will be loaded up into some part of the GFDRR website. So we'll be doing that sometime over the next couple of weeks so that you can access a range of materials that go into this stuff in a lot more depth and by specific sectors and areas and so on. So that will be available. It's the kind of stuff you can hand the person that you hire when you don't have the time to do it yourself, to use as resources as they find out what happens. Okay, well, being a pilot, some things went slower than others and differently than vision. And what I want to ask you, we are now to the point where in the program you were given, we're supposed to end at 4:30, and do some feedback before, because it is a pilot, before we finish up, both a written form and to get some verbal feedback because it is a pilot. What I wanted to ask you is, you all look like you're pretty tired. You could, if you wanted to stay just a little bit longer, do an exercise to apply this to a very typical DRM project, one that has infrastructure, capacity building of government, and IEC activities. Or if you're just tired and you've had enough for one day, we could just just leave it at this for now and look at what more can be done in the future. So we'll be missing the monitoring and evaluation module, unfortunately.
If you have resources on 7 of the resources that you will.
Yeah. And even on, I'll just flip through, you can see on the PowerPoint itself. That goes with that one. So you can see what you can read if you take a look at it. The exercise was on a flood management program, but the monitoring and evaluation, it goes through just a general overview, a refresher, a couple of slides for people on the World Bank's approach to results-based monitoring and evaluation. Then it gets into where can you plug this in, what are the stages in developing a project or a program, area of change, results framework, indicator development. These are all the places it needs to be plugged in. There's a list of questions that should be the basis of asking in the theory of change part. these are some key questions that you can ask to find out or to get the people working on this to be able to tell you, are there people missing and people at risk of being left out of the programming, and what sort of things can be done about it. There's an example in it of just taking from the one about hazard resilient construction that just goes through a results chain and what it might look like in terms of the a type of indicator that you might put in there, how social inclusion would look. A few examples of some types of social inclusion indicators.
Can you make it larger?
It would be off the screen, but basically we'll send you the presentation so that you can actually read it, since we didn't get to go through it properly. And there's an example given of a program that's done this and some of the types of indicators that we come up with. And the Philippines also was the country that I mentioned that got this into their country diagnostics and into their country partnership agreement. So they actually have elements of social inclusion and disaster risk management embedded in that framework and in the performance measurement system at the country level as well, as the programming level. Just some information on what kind of information you can get and where you can get it from to know if your social inclusion is working. A bit about that link between quantitative and qualitative that I mentioned. And there was an exercise that we wanted time to do, which was just to take the Senegal one that was going to get you to try and integrate some social inclusion, and then how are you going to measure what you decided to put in. So that was just an exercise at the end of it to give how to go yourself with a worksheet. The worksheet showing some possibilities and examples. So we'll send that stuff out to you. So that's probably it. So what I'd like to do is to get you to fill out your forms, your evaluation forms, but also to get some feedback from you as to what you think, what you thought worked well, what you thought didn't work well, what recommendations or suggestions would you make, because we're going to fine-tune this and work to improve it, and also eventually we hope to have it turned into online training modules for people in the field. So it's really important that we get it right. So,
You want people to give you oral feedback now, or you're supposing
we get so if we could get some verbal feedback too, what people are doing the forms as well. Who wants to be brave? So, maybe where to begin?
Start off just by saying that I now have worked with 3 development agencies in the U.S., AID, P, now World Bank, and this is the first time that I've seen anybody attempting to ensure social inclusion broadly, but especially including particular issues that I was here to talk about. So I think this is quite a great advance. The World Bank is helping move forward. So I can
Do you have any suggestions for things you would add or do differently or change in it?
The only thing I'd say is that as we think about refining whatever the training is going to be, we could probably go from just the examples we found so far that relate to SOGI to see if we can turn that into some kind of exercise that people can go through. Because that might be the one of all the issues, since it's so new, development agenda, not just DRM, that people have had the least amount of exposure to. And so they might need to go through an exercise to try to figure out how do you actually practically include this, and the work that we're going to do around this, and how do you measure it? The last thing you mentioned.
If I could ask in your written feedback, or if you just want to say it, because we had a real mix today of people with different years of expertise, different backgrounds. We have social people, we have DRM people, we have social protection person. So it's hard to get the balance right. So if you could, because sometimes for me I was like, oh, this is so basic, everyone will know it. And then I heard people saying, oh, I didn't know that. So if you could tell us around, what, if something, what specific things were too basic or if that wasn't the case. Because we will be turning this into an online module, and we will be doing it face-to-face again and bringing it out to country offices as well. So we want you to be really constructive, and because you guys have been guinea pigs for the first offering of this, so we appreciate that and we want your feedback. And I just want to thank Cynthia for being such a great facilitator. And I want to thank Andres for helping us get this all together. And I want to thank Cliff and Charlotte for being here and spending so much time with us today, because it's been, for me, I learned a lot, coming from social and DRM, but your specific areas of expertise have been really eye-opening. I think it's been really valuable to have you here today. So thanks a lot for
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting. I think it's a great topic. I think it's very, very difficult, like you said from the beginning, to squeeze it all into one day. I think, granted, look, and I'm really sorry, I obviously missed sort of 45 minutes of quite an important part. I had to skip out for a doctor's appointment, but I thought, I think along the lines of what Cliff was saying, I think some case studies are really good, but I think some case studies that are sort of more focused around issues that we would meet in a design phase of a project. So what are the actual sort of going through an exercise of saying, okay, so some of our colleagues are planning, for instance, an infrastructure project in this and that context. So what are the different steps that we go through? And then actually sort of having that practice of saying, okay, so these are the questions we answer. These are the people we need to get involved. These are the consultations we do. These are some of the design options we have in terms of actually being inclusive. I think would be really, really helpful to perhaps sort of, at least for me, as I go into our own projects and take these sort of lessons back with us, that it becomes very practical to sort of take that to the next step. For me, I think it would be fantastic spend a little more time on these things. If we could actually have a 2-3 day course where you would go through a lot more of these things in details alongside the gender training, so we had some more time.
And we didn't get to do that Senegal case study, which was that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's hard to get people out for 2 to 3 days though now.
Unless we take them away. Out of DC.
My building would be far away.
Far enough. But the stuff that you started doing from 3 o'clock, I still don't understand how that hour that you just spent, I still don't understand how that fit into your framework. So I think it would have been much more useful not doing that, but doing the last slide that you quickly ran through. Because, for example, your example of that biodiversity project, I still don't understand in that project how social inclusion was. You just read through it, and I couldn't get, okay, what were the key entry points of social inclusion that was actually used in that project? How was it monitored? How you couldn't use those examples. I don't, it was hard for me to capture exactly why those examples were even provided, because you didn't do it in the framework that you presented at the very end of, the different results framework and the way you did the indication. So I work on biodiversity projects, but I still would know how that would have been, that example was actually useful for me because you didn't present it in that way. So that would have been useful if you were going to present examples to put it in that framework that you actually showed at the end. So perhaps if you had gone through those slides first and then picked out and concentrate on your example in Pakistan, for example, about exactly how the design process went, it would have been really interesting because I don't know of any other project that has actually done it. something that's focused on disability like you did. And so it would have been very interesting to get that kind of more practical kind of examples instead of a regular project that everyone knows about. You know, make it a lot more linked to practical, like you did.
Others?
I think I agree with Didi that I think this was very in-depth subject. And this was very good as an introduction, but then maybe we could have like a subcomponent of focusing on maybe hydromet, how we can integrate social inclusion, hydromet, or maybe safer. So I think focusing on major DRM intervention kind of happening and taking kind of specific example, because post-disaster context, I think we hear many stories, but then majority of our work is more kind of communication side. So I think if we can have that kind of focus session on that.
Yeah. So that makes me think that maybe for the online, because what we're doing for the gender course is by the request of DRM people and staff, they're saying, if I'm doing hydromet, what does that look like for me? If I'm doing early morning system, what does it look like? What are the specifics? So maybe we could do the same type of guidance to put into online. Because it's difficult enough to get people together around social inclusion for one day. If we did a day on hydromet, a day, it's training all year round, right? But it's so I think we can think about how we can do that so people can be self-paced or selective around their modules.
So that's also related to the participants. Today we discussed, majority here is women, why is that? But then if we focus on specific infrastructure type of projects, like well, maybe we increase the diversity.
Another idea is to use some resources to, if people want to request, sometimes we do sort of like safe space project clinics, right? Like to say, like you're developing an operation, you want to do social inclusion, to bring interested people and experienced people to just, brainstorm with you about different design ideas or what you can do or things like that. So if that's something people are interested in, let us know as well.
Any last thoughts? Okay, well then we might wrap it up there and collect the things. Thank you very much for your participation and your hard work today. And I hope that there's some things you can carry forward into your work at the end of the day. And, some resources that you can access and give some thought to getting that support and help to do some of this stuff from people who've done a lot of it before.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.